worst kind of pain is caring deeply and watching it backfire, not because you expect anything in return, but because caring is just who you are. You show up without being asked. You check in on people who never think to check on you. You stay up late listening to problems that were never yours to carry. You give your time, your energy, your patience, not to be praised, just because you care, and somehow that becomes the thing that hurts you. Because some people don't meet kindness with care. They get comfortable with it. They start expecting it. They stop noticing it. Your effort becomes routine. Your consistency becomes invisible until one day you don't show up the same way anymore. That's when they finally notice. That's when they ask what's wrong. But by then you're already tired of explaining your intentions, tired of proving your heart, tired of giving pieces of yourself to people who never stay long enough to understand what it costs you. It's not that you regret caring, you just wish having a good heart didn't hurt this much. And maybe the hardest truth is realizing that loving deeply doesn't guarantee you'll be loved the same way. But that doesn't make your softness a weakness. It just means it needs protection. Don't stop caring. Just be careful who you hand that kind of love to. When you're the one who cares deeply, you usually become not the reliable one, the one people vent to, the one people lean on, the one who always answers. You're dependable in ways people don't even notice anymore. They assume you'll be there, assume you'll understand, assume you'll forgive, so they stop asking how you are, not out of cruelty, but because consistency gets mistaken for endless capacity. You start carrying emotional weight that was never meant to be yours alone. Other people's stress, other people's problems, other people's moods, and you hold it all quietly because you don't want to be a burden the way you never see them as one. But over time, something shifts. You feel tired in a deeper way, not just physically, emotionally. You notice how rarely someone shows up for you the way you show up for them, how quickly your needs get overlooked, how easily your exhaustion goes unseen. And that's when it starts to hurt differently, because you didn't ask for much, you just wanted effort to meet effort, care to meet care, but instead you became the place people take from without realizing they're draining you, and slowly being the strong one starts to feel like being the forgotten one. Eventually something changes, not in a dramatic way. You don't announce it, you don't make a scene, you just stop giving the same way you used to. You reply a little later, you don't over-explain anymore. You stop stretching yourself thin just to be available, and that's when people notice. Not when you were exhausted, not when you were drained, not when you were giving everything. They notice when you pull back. Suddenly they ask what's wrong, suddenly they feel the distance, suddenly they miss the version of you that was always there. And that part hurts, because it shows you something you didn't want to see. They didn't miss you. They missed the access. They missed the comfort you provided, the effort you gave without question, the way you made things easier for them. So when you stop showing up like that, it feels personal to them. But for you, it wasn't about punishment, it was about survival. You didn't stop caring. You just stop bleeding quietly, and realizing that is both painful and freeing, because it teaches you this: anyone who only notices your absence was never really paying attention to your presence. When you finally start pulling back, the hardest part isn't the silence, it's the guilt. You feel like you're doing something wrong just by protecting yourself. You second guess every boundary. You wonder if you're being cold, if you're being selfish, if you're changing. Because when you spent your life being the one who gives, rest feels like laziness, distance feels like cruelty, and saying no feels like failure. You weren't taught how to have limits. You were taught how to endure. So the moment you stop overextending, your nervous system panics. It tells you to explain yourself, to soften it, to give just a little more so no one feels uncomfortable. But here's the truth: boundaries don't feel good at first because you're used to being useful, not protected. You learned that love meant access, that care meant availability, that being needed was the same as being valued. So when you remove access, it feels like you're taking something away, but you're not. You're just finally keeping something for yourself, and that discomfort, that's not you doing something wrong. That's you breaking a pattern that was costing you more than you realized. People who care deeply often confuse love with sacrifice. They believe loving someone means giving more, trying harder, holding on longer than they should. They tell themselves, if I'm patient enough, they'll notice. If I stay kind, it'll balance out. If I keep showing up, it'll be worth it. But love was never meant to cost you your peace. Somewhere along the way, you learned that being good meant being accommodating. That being loving meant putting yourself last. So you stayed quiet about your needs. You ignored your exhaustion. You told yourself it wasn't that bad as long as everyone else was okay. But sacrifice without reciprocity doesn't make love deeper. It makes it heavier. Because when you're always the one adjusting, the relationship stops being shared. It becomes one-sided. And the scariest part is people can get used to that version of you. They don't ask if it's costing you anything. They just assume you'll keep paying the price until one day you realize love shouldn't feel like self-abandonment. Caring deeply doesn't mean giving endlessly, and loving someone should never require you to disappear in the process. There's a moment when something finally clicks. You get tired of proving that you're genuine, tired of explaining your intentions, tired of showing people your heart just so they can decide whether it deserves care. So you stop performing, you don't overextend anymore, you don't chase reassurance, you don't give more just to feel secure. And at first that feels uncomfortable because you're not used to being this guarded. You're used to leading with softness even when it costs you. But protecting your heart isn't the same as closing it. You're not becoming cold, you're becoming selective. You start noticing who respects your limits and who only liked you when you were endlessly available. You see who adjusts with you, instead of expecting you to bend every time, and that's when you realize something important. You don't need to prove your kindness. The right people will feel it without needing to take advantage of it. Protecting your heart doesn't make you less loving. It just means you're finally loving yourself too. Once you stop overgiving, you start noticing something clearly. Not everyone reacts the same way. Some people get uncomfortable, they push back, they ask why you're different now. They miss the version of you that gave without limits and never asked for anything back. But others adjust. They respect the boundary. They meet you halfway. They don't make you feel guilty for needing space or balance. And that difference matters because it shows you who valued you and who only valued what you provided. The right people don't punish you for protecting your heart. They don't withdraw when you stop overextending. They lean in. They check on you. They notice your effort because it's no longer automatic. They give without keeping score. And for the first time, caring doesn't feel draining. It feels mutual. You realize you don't have to shrink your heart to keep people around. You don't have to exhaust yourself to be worthy of love. The people meant for you won't disappear when you stop bleeding quietly. They'll stay because they never needed you to hurt in order to feel close. At the end of all this, you realize something important. Your softness was never the problem. Caring deeply wasn't a mistake. Being attentive wasn't wrong. Showing up wasn't foolish. The pain came from giving that level of care to people who didn't know how to hold it. Because the right people don't drain you. They don't get comfortable taking. They don't wait until you pull back to finally notice your value. They see it while you're still giving, and they give back. With the right people, your kindness doesn't become invisible. Your effort doesn't become expected. Your heart doesn't become something to manage. It becomes appreciated. You don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to overextend. You don't have to lose pieces of yourself just to stay connected. Your softness becomes strength because it's met with care, not entitlement. And that's when you understand the goal was never to stop caring. It was to stop pouring your heart into places that couldn't return it. So keep your softness, just place it wisely, because in the right hands, your heart won't hurt this much. It'll finally feel safe. You don't chase love because you're romantic. You chase love because you don't know how to sit with yourself yet. Because silence makes your thoughts loud. Because being alone feels like proof that something about you isn't enough. So you look for love to fill the space. You attach quickly. You overextend. You give more than you should, sooner than you should. Not because you're stupid, but because being chosen feels like relief. Like if someone wants you, then maybe you can stop questioning yourself for a while. You don't just want connection. You want validation. You want someone to prove that you're worth staying for, worth prioritizing, worth choosing. So when someone shows interest, you lean in hard, you ignore red flags, you excuse inconsistency. You tell yourself, if I love them better, they'll love me back. And when they pull away, it doesn't just hurt, it confirms your worst fear, that you weren't enough. So you try harder, you become more available, more understanding, more forgiving than you should be. You abandon parts of yourself just to keep someone close, and you call it love. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not chasing them. You're chasing the feeling of being wanted. Because when someone loves you, even temporarily, it quiets the voice in your head that says you're unlovable on your own. That's why breakups destroy you. You don't just lose the person, you lose the version of yourself that felt okay for a moment. You lose the distraction. You lose the proof. You lose the illusion that someone else could fix what you haven't faced yet. And that's the part no one wants to admit. Chasing love like this isn't romance. It's avoidance. It's using someone else's attention to avoid learning how to give it to yourself. Because loving yourself is harder than loving someone else. It means sitting with your flaws without asking someone to overlook them. It means choosing yourself without needing applause. It means learning how to feel whole without being held together by another person. And that terrifies you, so you chase love instead. But here's the shift, the part that hurts before it heals. The moment you stop chasing love to fill the emptiness, you start attracting it from a different place. Not desperation, not fear, not self-doubt, but choice. Because real love doesn't arrive to save you. It arrives when you're no longer asking someone else to convince you that you matter. And until you learn to sit with yourself, without distraction, without validation, without escape, every love you chase will feel heavier than it should. You don't need someone to love you harder. You need to stop outsourcing your worth. And when you finally do, love stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like connection. You don't chase love because you're passionate. You chase it because being alone feels unbearable. Because when things get quiet, your thoughts get loud, and they don't tell you kind things. So you look for someone else to sit in that space with you, to distract you, to validate you, to make you feel wanted enough to forget how little you feel about yourself. You don't just want connection, you want relief. Relief from the constant feeling that something about you is missing, that you're behind, that if you were enough, someone would have stayed by now. So when someone shows interest, you grab onto it, you attach fast, you give more than you should, you bend your boundaries before they even ask, not because you're weak, but because being chosen feels like proof. Like if someone wants you, then maybe the voice in your head can finally shut up for a while. You start confusing attention with love, consistency with commitment, chemistry with safety, and when they pull away, it doesn't just hurt, it confirms everything you were afraid of. So you chase harder, you explain more, you forgive more, you accept less. You tell yourself that if you just love them better, they'll love you back the way you need. But what you're really doing is asking someone else to give you a sense of worth you don't know how to give yourself yet. And that's why it feels so desperate, because it's not about them. It's about the fear that without love, you have nothing to stand on. This isn't romance, it's survival. And until you learn how to sit with yourself without needing someone else to make you feel okay, every love you chase will feel heavier than it should. At some point, chasing love turns into abandoning yourself. You stop asking what you need and start asking what they want, how much space to give, how much to hold back, how to be easier to stay with. You shrink in small ways at first. You don't bring things up because you don't want to seem difficult. You accept less effort because at least they're still here. You tell yourself you're being understanding when really you're being afraid that if you ask for more, they'll leave. So you adapt, you become more available than you should, more forgiving than is healthy. You explain away behavior that already made you feel small, and every time you do, you move a little further away from yourself, but you call it love. You tell yourself this is what it means to fight for someone, to be patient, to be loyal. What you don't realize yet is that real love doesn't require you to disappear quietly. The reason chasing feels exhausting is because you're running from your own emptiness. You're hoping someone else will choose you loudly enough to silence the doubt inside you. So when they pull back, your anxiety spikes, you replay conversations, you blame yourself, you look for ways to fix it, not because you were wrong, but because you're terrified of being left alone with yourself again. And that's the cycle. The more you chase, the more you lose your footing. The more you lose yourself, the more you need them to feel okay. That's why it hurts so much. Not because they were everything, but because you made them responsible for holding you together. And no one can carry that forever. This is the part people avoid talking about. Chasing love like this doesn't mean you care deeply. It means you don't feel grounded without external validation. And until you learn how to stand on your own, how to sit with yourself without needing to be chosen, love will keep feeling like something you have to earn instead of something you share. When you chase love from a place of emptiness, you don't attract people who pour into you. You attract people who take, not always intentionally, not always maliciously, but people who sense, even subconsciously, that you're willing to overgive just to stay connected. They feel how flexible you are, how much you're willing to adjust, how far you'll bend before you break. So they let you. They accept your effort without matching it. They enjoy your presence without committing to it. They keep you close enough to benefit from your care, but far enough to avoid responsibility. And because you're chasing, you don't question it at first. You tell yourself this is just how relationships work, that love takes patience, that maybe they just need time. But deep down, something feels off. You're always the one checking in, always the one clarifying, always the one trying to fix the distance that keeps appearing out of nowhere. And instead of asking why they're inconsistent, you ask what you did wrong. That's the trap. Chasing love trains you to blame yourself for other people's lack of effort. You start believing that if someone isn't choosing you, it's because you didn't love them well enough. So you try harder. You give more reassurance, more patience, more access to parts of you that should have been protected, and the dynamic deepens. They stay comfortable, you stay anxious, they get affection without accountability, you get hope without security, and that imbalance keeps repeating until you finally see it for what it is. You're not unlucky in love, you're just chasing from a place that tells the wrong people you'll accept less than you deserve, because people who are capable of real love don't feel comfortable being chased. They meet you halfway. The ones who stay distant, inconsistent, unclear, they stay because the chase benefits them. And until you stop chasing to feel worthy, you'll keep finding yourself in the same story with different faces. Eventually, there's a moment where chasing love stops feeling hopeful and starts feeling exhausting. You realize you're tired, not because love is hard, but because you've been doing all the emotional work alone. You're the one overthinking, the one adjusting, the one trying to hold something together that keeps slipping through your fingers. And for the first time, you ask a quiet question you've been avoiding. Why does love feel like something I have to prove myself worthy of? That question is uncomfortable because it points inward. It forces you to see that chasing love has been a distraction, a way to avoid sitting with yourself, a way to avoid asking why you don't feel enough without someone choosing you. Because as long as you're focused on them, their mixed signals, their distance, their inconsistency, you don't have to face the emptiness underneath. You don't have to ask why you're afraid of being alone, why validation feels necessary, why rejection feels like confirmation instead of redirection. So you keep chasing, but here's the truth that hurts before it heals. Chasing love delays self-healing. Every ounce of energy you spend trying to be chosen is energy you're not spending, learning how to choose yourself, and that's why nothing ever feels settled. Because no matter who you're with, you're still looking to them to fix something they didn't break. They can't give you security you haven't built internally. They can't love you into self-worth. They can't silence the doubt that existed before they arrived. And once you see that, chasing loses its appeal. Not because you stop wanting love, but because you realize love isn't supposed to feel like survival. It's supposed to feel like addition, not rescue. And the moment you stop running from yourself is the moment the chase starts to lose its power. Learning how to sit with yourself is the hardest part of this whole process, because when you stop chasing love, there's nothing left to distract you. No text to wait for, no signals to decode, no person to center your emotions around, just you. And that's when everything you've been avoiding comes to the surface. The insecurity you buried under effort, the loneliness you masked with attachment, the belief that without someone choosing you, you don't really matter. It feels uncomfortable at first, almost unbearable. You reach for your phone instinctively. You miss the chaos, you miss feeling needed, because chasing gave your pain direction, it gave your emptiness a target. Now there's nowhere to run. And this is where most people go back. They re-enter old dynamics, text people they shouldn't, lower their standards just enough to feel wanted again, not because they're weak, but because sitting with yourself requires honesty. It forces you to see that no one abandoned you the way you've been abandoning yourself. Every time you chased someone who was unsure, you told yourself your needs could wait. Every time you accepted inconsistency, you taught yourself to tolerate being half chosen. So being alone feels unfamiliar, not because you can't handle it, but because you've never stayed here long enough to build something solid inside yourself. This is where self-love actually starts, not affirmations, not confidence quotes, but learning how to stay when there's no validation coming in, learning how to comfort yourself instead of outsourcing it, learning how to choose yourself without needing approval. And slowly, something shifts. You stop craving attention. You stop confusing intensity with connection. You stop chasing people who feel familiar for the wrong reasons. Because now, you're no longer running from yourself. And when you stop doing that, love stops feeling like something you need to survive. When you finally start building self-love, the chase doesn't just slow down. It feels wrong. You notice it first in small ways. The anxiety doesn't hook you the same. Inconsistency doesn't feel exciting anymore. It feels draining. People who once felt magnetic now feel loud, unclear, unsafe, and that confuses you because for so long, chaos felt like chemistry. You were drawn to people who kept you guessing because guessing felt familiar, because uncertainty mirrored how unsure you felt about yourself. But now that you're learning how to stand on your own, that dynamic stops working. You don't feel the urge to prove yourself anymore. You don't feel the need to over-explain your worth. And suddenly, chasing feels humiliating, not because you're above it, but because you're finally grounded enough to feel how one-sided it always was. You start wanting different things: clarity instead of sparks, consistency instead of intensity, presence instead of pursuit. You want to be met, not chased or chasing. And here's the part people don't expect. Self-love makes some connections fall apart. People who benefited from your overgiving feel the shift immediately. They sense you're no longer bending, no longer available on demand, no longer trying to earn their attention, and some of them leave. Not because you changed for the worse, but because the version of you that chased them is gone. That can hurt, because even when you're healing, loss still feels like loss, but this time it doesn't destroy you, because you're no longer tying your value to someone else's choice. You understand something now. Love that requires chasing is love that feeds on insecurity, and love that's healthy doesn't need pursuit to survive. It shows up, it stays, it chooses you without being convinced. And the more you learn how to love yourself quietly, consistently, honestly, the less tolerance you have for anything that makes you feel like you need to beg to belong. When the chasing finally stops, a new fear shows up. Not the fear of being alone, but the fear of trusting love again without desperation. Because now you're calmer, more grounded, less reactive, and that feels unfamiliar. You're used to love coming with anxiety, with overthinking, with that constant urge to secure someone's attention before it disappears. So when things are steady, part of you doesn't know what to do. You wait for the other shoe to drop. You look for signs something is wrong. You brace yourself for distance that never comes, because chaos used to feel like proof that something mattered. Now peace feels suspicious. You're not chasing anymore, but you're still learning how to receive, how to let someone show up without questioning why, how to accept consistency without trying to earn it. And that's harder than it sounds, because chasing trained you to believe love had to be worked for. That if you weren't doing something, fixing something, proving something, it wouldn't last. So when someone meets you without needing to be convinced, your instinct is to pull back, not because you don't want it, but because you're afraid of trusting something that isn't fueled by fear. This is the quiet stage of healing, where you're not running anymore, but you're not fully relaxed either. You're learning that love doesn't have to feel urgent to be real, that being chosen calmly is still being chosen, and slowly you start letting yourself believe it. You stop checking for exits, stop rehearsing disappointment, stop preparing for abandonment that hasn't happened, because for the first time, you're not chasing to feel worthy. You're standing still and letting love come to you. And that's when you realize how much strength it actually takes to stay. When you stop needing love to save you, everything about it changes. You're not chasing anymore, but you're also not hiding. You're just stable, and that's unfamiliar. You notice how different it feels to want someone instead of needing them. There's no panic behind it, no urgency, no feeling that if this doesn't work out, you'll fall apart. And that scares you in a new way, because chasing gave you purpose. It gave your emotions somewhere to go. It made love feel intense, consuming, alive. Now love feels quieter, not empty, just grounded. You don't lose yourself in people anymore. You don't rearrange your life to keep someone interested. You don't abandon your needs to avoid being left. And because of that, you become harder to hook. Not emotionally unavailable, just unavailable to dynamics that require you to shrink. You start noticing things you used to ignore, how someone responds to boundaries, how they handle consistency, how they show up when you're not overgiving. And if they fade when you stop chasing, you don't panic, you understand. They weren't there for you. They were there for the version of you that was always reaching. That realization hurts, but it also frees you. Because now you know love that disappears when you stop chasing was never love meant to stay. This is where self-love changes the rules. You don't try to be impressive, you don't try to be indispensable, you don't try to secure someone's feelings. You let them show you who they are when you're not doing all the work, and for the first time, love feels optional, not because it doesn't matter, but because your worth no longer depends on it. You're not chasing to fill a void anymore. You're choosing from a place that already feels whole. And that's when love stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like something you can welcome without losing yourself. Healing doesn't just bring relief, it brings grief. Because when you stop chasing love, you don't just lose old dynamics. You lose the version of yourself who survived by reaching. You look back at who you were and feel a strange mix of sadness and compassion. You remember how hard you tried, how much you gave, how badly you wanted to be chosen, and part of you wants to go back, not because it was healthy, but because it was familiar. Chasing gave you direction. It gave your pain something to focus on. It made loneliness feel purposeful. Now that version of you is gone, and that hurts. You grieve the person who believed love had to be earned, who thought being enough meant being useful, agreeable, easy to keep. You grieve the nights you waited, the messages you rewrote, the boundaries you swallowed just to stay connected, not because you were weak, but because you didn't know another way yet. And healing means accepting something painful. No one did this to you. You did it because you didn't know how to hold yourself without being held. That realization can feel brutal because it removes the villain. There's no one left to blame, just patterns you learn to survive something deeper. So you sit with it, with the sadness, with the regret, with the understanding that you were doing the best you could with what you knew at the time. And slowly, that grief turns into respect. Respect for how much you endured, for how deeply you wanted love, for how brave it was to keep believing, even in the wrong places. You don't hate the old version of you. You thank them because they carried you until you were strong enough to stop chasing and start choosing yourself. And that's what makes this stage heavy. You're not broken anymore, but you're still letting go. The chase ends the moment you stop asking love to fix you, not because you stop wanting connection, but because you stop needing it to feel whole. You finally understand something simple that took you years to learn. Love was never supposed to be proof that you matter. It was never meant to carry your worth, never meant to quiet your self-doubt, never meant to save you from yourself. That was too much to ask of anyone. So you stopped chasing, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in clarity. You stop running after people who make you feel uncertain. Stop explaining your needs to people who don't listen. Stop overgiving just to feel chosen, because now being chosen by yourself comes first. You learn how to sit with silence without panicking, how to be alone without feeling abandoned, how to exist without needing constant reassurance, and something changes. Love no longer feels urgent, it no longer feels like survival. It no longer feels like something you have to secure before it disappears. It becomes optional, not because it's unimportant, but because your life no longer collapses without it. And that's when the real shift happens. You don't attract love from desperation anymore. You don't bond through wounds. You don't mistake intensity for connection. You choose slowly. You choose clearly. You choose from a place that isn't begging to be filled. And if someone doesn't meet you there, you don't chase. You let them go, not because you don't care, but because you care enough about yourself to stop repeating the same pain with different people. The version of you that chased love wasn't weak. They were hurting, they were lonely, they were trying to survive. But this version of you, this version doesn't run. They stand still, they breathe. They choose themselves even when no one is watching. And from here on out, love won't feel like something you have to earn. It'll feel like something you share with someone who meets you without being chased. That's where the cycle ends. Not with finding love, but with finally finding yourself. I've been thinking about something lately. There's a difference between being loved and being convenient, and sometimes I can't tell which one I am. Because you say you love me, you act like you care, you stay, but staying isn't the same as investing. You can stay in someone's life because they're easy, because they're understanding, because they don't cause too many problems, because they don't threaten your comfort. That doesn't automatically mean you love them deeply. And that's where my mind starts wandering. If I stop being easy, if I stopped being patient, if I stopped adjusting when you're distant, if I stopped giving you the benefit of the doubt every time something feels off, would you still love me the same? Or would things start feeling heavier to you? Because I love in a way that's active. I think about you when you're not around. I consider how my actions affect you. I replay conversations to make sure I didn't hurt you unintentionally. I check in even when I'm tired. And I don't do that to be praised. I do that because I care, so when I don't feel that same level of intentionality back, it doesn't make me angry. It makes me unsure, because love shouldn't feel like something one person maintains. It shouldn't feel like if I stopped trying, everything would slowly collapse. Sometimes I wonder if you love the way I show up for you, but not the actual weight of loving me back, because loving me means consistency. It means emotional awareness. It means showing up even when you're stressed. It means reassuring without being asked 5 times. And I don't know if you're loving me or just enjoying how I love you. And that difference matters more than people think. Because I don't want to be someone's peace if I'm not also their priority. I don't want to be someone's stability if I'm not also deeply valued. I don't want to be easy to keep just because I'm hard to lose. I want to feel chosen loudly enough that I don't question it silently. And lately, I've been questioning it. I think what makes this question uncomfortable is that nothing is technically wrong. You're not cruel, you're not distant all the time, you're not openly careless, but love isn't just about what someone isn't doing. It's about what they are doing consistently. And sometimes I feel like I'm filling in emotional gaps you don't even notice are there. When I feel tension, I address it. When I sense distance, I close it. When communication weakens, I strengthen it. But when I pull back slightly, even a little, I can feel the difference immediately, and that tells me something. Because if the connection shifts the moment I stop overcompensating, then maybe I've been holding more weight than I realized. And that's exhausting. Not physically, emotionally. Because loving someone deeply while wondering if they love you with the same intentionality creates a quiet insecurity you don't talk about out loud. You start asking yourself subtle questions. If I didn't initiate, would they? If I didn't reassure, would they? If I didn't bring warmth into the conversation, would it still feel warm? And I don't want to think like that. I don't want to calculate effort. I don't want to measure energy. But imbalance forces you to notice patterns, and patterns don't lie. There's also a difference between being wanted and being valued. Wanted is temporary, wanted is emotional in the moment, valued is consistent. Valued means you're considered in decisions, valued means your feelings are handled carefully, valued means someone protects the connection even when things feel stable. Sometimes I feel wanted, but I don't always feel protected. And protection doesn't mean control, it means awareness. It means someone thinking, I don't want to lose this, so I'll handle it with care. I want to feel like that. I don't want to be someone you assume will always stay. I want to be someone you actively choose to keep, because there's a dangerous comfort in knowing someone is loyal. It can make you relax too much. It can make you stop trying as hard. It can make you think effort isn't urgent anymore. But love without continued effort slowly turns into maintenance, and maintenance feels transactional. I don't want to be loved because I'm stable. I don't want to be loved because I'm understanding. I don't want to be loved because I don't make things difficult. I want to be loved because I matter, because my presence is important to you, because losing me would actually affect you, not just inconvenience you. And if I ever have to question that for too long, then something isn't landing the way love should. Because when you're deeply loved, you don't feel like you're the only one holding the emotional glue together. You feel supported, you feel met, you feel secure enough to stop asking whether you're too much. And until I feel that consistently, not just in moments, not just after I express doubt, that question will keep circling in my mind. Do you love me, or do you just like having me around? There's something I haven't said out loud. I think I'm afraid of being loved comfortably. Not passionately, not intentionally, comfortably. Comfortable love is quiet. It assumes I'll always be there. It stops checking as much. It stops pursuing as much. It stops protecting the connection as carefully. And it doesn't look toxic. It just slowly feels less alive, less intentional. Because in the beginning, you pay attention to everything. You notice small mood changes. You ask deeper questions. You show up with energy. But once things feel secure, once I've proven I'm loyal, once you feel like I'm not going anywhere, do you still put in that same care? Or do you relax into the assumption that I'll always adjust? Because here's the truth, I do adjust. I understand when you're tired, I understand when you're stressed, I understand when you need space, but understanding shouldn't mean I absorb everything. It shouldn't mean I silently carry the emotional difference. And sometimes I feel like I do. Sometimes I feel like I love you in ways that require awareness, and you love me in ways that require comfort. There's a difference. Awareness asks, how does this affect them? Comfort asks, they'll understand. And I always do. But at what cost? Because when you're the emotionally steady one, the patient one, the consistent one, people forget you still need reassurance too. They forget you still need to feel chosen. They forget that even the calmest person can start questioning things if effort shifts. And I've felt shifts, not dramatic ones, small ones, less curiosity, less intentional communication, less urgency to fix small disconnects. And when small disconnects aren't addressed, they grow, not into explosions, into distance. And distance is quiet, it doesn't scream, it settles, it makes you feel slightly alone even when someone is right there. That's the part that scares me, not losing you, feeling alone while still having you. Because if I'm gonna love someone deeply, I don't want to feel like I'm maintaining it by myself. I don't want to feel like my emotional awareness is what keeps us stable. I want to feel met. I want to feel like if I pull back slightly, you lean in. I want to feel like if I'm overwhelmed, you step up. I want to feel like if I go quiet, you notice without me announcing it. That's love. Not just staying, not just saying it, but actively participating in it. And until I feel that consistently, not just when I bring it up, not just after conflict, not just when I look distant, that question will sit with me. Are you loving me deeply, or just loving the fact that I make things easy? I think the hardest truth I'm slowly accepting is this: if I have to constantly question the depth of your love, then something about it doesn't feel secure. And love without security becomes anxiety. Not loud anxiety, quiet anxiety. The kind where I replay conversations in my head, the kind where I overanalyze tone, the kind where I wonder if I'm asking for too much just because I want consistency. And I don't want to be that version of myself. I don't want to love guarded. I don't want to measure how much I give. I don't want to calculate who initiates more. I don't want to mentally track effort just to reassure myself that things are balanced, because love shouldn't feel like an equation. It shouldn't feel like if I relax, everything will slowly fall apart. It should feel shared, protected from both sides, maintained by both people. There's a difference between being loved and being relied on. Being relied on means you're useful. Being loved means you're valued. Being relied on means you bring stability. Being loved means someone protects your emotional stability too. Being relied on feels good at first. It feels important, but over time, if it's not matched with intentional care, it starts to feel heavy, because I don't want to be the emotional backbone of something without feeling emotionally supported myself. And here's the part that really matters. If I stopped being the easy one, if I stopped being the understanding one, if I stopped smoothing over tension before it grows, if I stopped filling emotional gaps without mentioning them, would you step up? Would you fight for it the same way? Would you lean in instead of leaning back? Or would things slowly drift because I'm no longer overcompensating? That question tells me everything, because real love doesn't depend on one person's emotional maturity to survive. Real love meets you halfway. It notices your silence. It responds to your distance with concern, not ego. It protects your heart even when you're not actively asking for protection. And I don't want dramatic love. I don't want obsessive love. I don't want love that feels like chaos. I want love that feels intentional. I want to feel chosen without begging for it. I want to feel prioritized without competing for it. I want to feel secure without constantly seeking proof. Because if you truly love me deeply, I won't feel like I'm guessing. I won't feel like I'm trying to convince myself. I won't feel like I'm the one holding the emotional glue together. I'll feel it in your consistency, in your effort after comfort sets in your willingness to maintain what we have instead of assuming it will maintain itself. And maybe you do love me, but if I constantly feel like I'm the one protecting the connection, then it's not balanced. And love without balance eventually becomes exhaustion. So the real question isn't just, do you love me? It's this: if I stop making it easy to love me, would you still love me the same? Or have I just been convenient all along? There's something about half-secure love that changes you slowly, not overnight, not dramatically, but quietly. You stop asking for reassurance because you don't want to seem needy. You stop bringing up small things because you don't want to create tension. You start telling yourself it's not that serious, even when it is. And little by little, you become smaller inside the relationship, not because you're weak, because you're trying to protect it. But protection shouldn't only come from one side. I shouldn't feel like I'm constantly managing the emotional temperature. I shouldn't feel like I'm the one making sure things don't drift, because when you love someone deeply, you don't just assume they'll stay. You actively maintain the connection. You don't just rely on their loyalty. You honor it. And sometimes I wonder if you've gotten used to me, used to my patience, used to my consistency, used to the fact that I rarely overreact. And being used to is dangerous because comfort without effort turns into complacency, and complacency slowly turns into distance. And distance is what makes someone start asking questions they never wanted to ask. I don't need to be chased every day, but I do need to feel chosen every day. There's a difference. Chasing is about excitement. Choosing is about intention. Choosing means you still show effort after the honeymoon phase fades. Choosing means you still check in emotionally even when nothing is wrong. Choosing means you don't let comfort replace care. And that's what I crave. Not intensity, not drama, not chaos disguised as passion. I want steady love, the kind where I don't have to analyze tone, the kind where I don't feel like I'm overthinking every small shift, the kind where my nervous system isn't constantly scanning for changes, because when love feels secure, your body relaxes. You don't brace for distance, you don't anticipate inconsistency, you don't question whether you matter that day, and lately I've caught myself bracing. That's what scares me. I've realized something about myself. When I start questioning whether I'm loved, I don't get loud, I get quiet, I observe more, I speak less, I test nothing, but I notice everything. I notice if you initiate, I notice if you reassure without being prompted, I notice if your effort stays steady or fluctuates, and if it fluctuates too much, I don't argue. I slowly detach, not because I want to, but because protecting my heart becomes instinct, and once I start detaching, it's hard to reverse, because detachment doesn't come from anger, it comes from exhaustion, from feeling like you've been carrying something emotionally alone for too long, and I don't want to detach from you. I want to feel secure with you, but security requires reciprocity. I think what hurts most is the possibility that you love me in your own way, but not in the way I need. And love isn't just about what you feel internally, it's about how it translates externally. If your love makes me feel unsure, if your love makes me feel like I'm asking for too much when I ask for consistency, if your love makes me feel like I have to shrink to keep the peace, then something isn't aligning, because real love doesn't make you question your value. It reinforces it. It doesn't make you wonder if you're too emotional. It makes you feel safe expressing emotion. And I don't want to be in a position where I'm constantly explaining why I need reassurance. I want it to feel natural, mutual, balanced. Here's the truth I don't say out loud. I don't want to compete with your comfort. I don't want to fight against your laziness. I don't want to beg for effort that should come naturally when someone truly values you. Because if you deeply loved me, you wouldn't want to risk losing me through neglect. You wouldn't let small disconnects grow. You wouldn't assume I'll always stay no matter what. You would treat the connection like it matters, not just when things feel unstable, but especially when things feel secure. Because secure love still requires maintenance, it still requires intention, it still requires showing up fully. And if I ever feel like I'm the only one doing that consistently, that's when love starts feeling heavy instead of safe. So do you love me? Or do you just like having me? Because those two things look similar at first, but over time, they feel very different. Liking having me means you enjoy my presence. Loving me means you protect it. Liking having me means you're comfortable. Loving me means you're intentional. Liking having me means you assume I'll stay. Loving me means you make sure I want to, and I don't want to stay somewhere I feel half secure. I don't want to slowly shrink just to keep something alive. I don't want to love loudly while feeling loved quietly. I want balance. I want mutual effort. I want to feel so consistently chosen that I stop asking myself this question entirely, because when you are deeply loved, you don't sit alone wondering. You feel it in the way they show up every day, not perfectly, but intentionally. And if I ever have to keep convincing myself that I'm loved, then maybe I'm not asking for too much. Maybe I'm just ready for a love that makes the answer obvious. There's a quiet kind of emptiness that doesn't feel dramatic. You're not falling apart. You're not in crisis. You just don't know why you're here. You wake up, you do what you're supposed to do, you get through the day. But underneath all of that, there's this question you don't know how to answer. What am I actually doing this for? You don't feel passionate. You don't feel called. You don't feel like anything is pulling you forward, and that scares you because everyone else seems so sure of where they're going. Having no purpose doesn't feel like sadness. It feels like drifting, like life is happening around you and you're just present for it, and no one really talks about that part. Not having a purpose doesn't mean you're failing, even though it feels like everyone else got some kind of direction you never received. Purpose isn't something people find all at once. It's not a switch that flips or a calling that suddenly appears. Most people are just moving forward with something small and calling it certainty. So when you don't feel that pull, you assume something is wrong with you. But a lack of purpose often comes from pressure to have a passion, pressure to be exceptional, pressure to turn your life into something meaningful as soon as possible. And when nothing fits, you feel empty, not because you lack value, but because you're tired of forcing meaning where it doesn't exist yet. You're not behind, you're just in a season where life hasn't revealed what it wants from you. And that's more common than anyone admits. Purpose usually doesn't appear because you thought hard enough about it. It grows out of living, out of trying things without certainty, out of getting bored, out of noticing what quietly holds your attention when no one is watching. So when you feel like you're drifting, it doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're between definitions, between who you were and who you haven't met yet. Drifting feels uncomfortable because it lacks labels. You can't explain it easily, you can't point to progress, but drifting is still movement. It's the space where you learn what doesn't fit, what doesn't excite you, what you don't want to carry forever, and that information matters. You're not failing a purpose, you're collecting data, even if it doesn't feel productive yet. It's okay if your life doesn't feel meaningful yet. Meaning isn't something you wake up with one day fully formed. Most of the time it shows up quietly, in moments you don't think are important, in things you do without an audience, in small choices that don't feel like destiny. The problem is we're taught to look for purpose as something big, a passion, a mission, a reason that explains everything. So when life feels ordinary or unclear or slow, you assume you're missing it. But meaning isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just learning how to care about something again. How to show up for one thing, one day at a time, without needing it to define your whole life. Not having purpose right now doesn't mean you never will. It just means you're still listening. Not knowing your purpose can actually protect you, because when you feel pressured to decide too early, you end up choosing something just to stop the discomfort. A path that looks good, a goal that sounds impressive, a version of purpose that belongs more to expectations than to you. And then you spend years trying to convince yourself it fits. Being unsure right now means you haven't locked yourself into the wrong story yet. It means you're giving yourself time to notice what feels honest, not just acceptable. Purpose that's chosen out of fear usually feels heavy. Purpose that grows naturally feels lighter even when it's hard. So if you're in the in-between, don't rush to label it. This pause isn't wasted time, it's you refusing to commit to a life that doesn't feel like yours. Purpose rarely starts as clarity, it starts as curiosity, a small pull towards something you don't fully understand yet, a moment where time passes a little faster than usual, a thought you keep returning to without knowing why, but because it doesn't feel big, you dismiss it, You tell yourself it doesn't count, that it's not serious enough, that it won't lead anywhere. So you wait for certainty instead of following interest, and the waiting feels like emptiness, but purpose isn't found by deciding your whole life at once. It's found by paying attention to what makes you feel slightly more alive than before. You don't need a 5-year plan. You don't need a calling. You just need one small thing that feels honest enough to try. Purpose grows from movement, not answers. Comparing your life to other people's purpose is what makes the emptiness heavier. You see people who seem sure, driven, certain, and you assume they know something you don't. But what you're seeing is confidence, not certainty. Most people choose a direction and grow into it later. They don't start with clarity. So when you compare their path to your uncertainty, you're not being fair to yourself. You're measuring your beginning against someone else's middle. Purpose isn't a race. It's not something you fall behind on. It shows up at different times for different people because it's shaped by experience, not pressure. The more you stop watching where everyone else is going, the easier it becomes to notice what's quietly calling you, and that's where purpose actually starts to form. It's okay if your purpose isn't impressive. Not everything meaningful looks big from the outside. We're taught that purpose has to be visible. A career, a mission, something people can point to and admire. So when what matters to you feels small, you dismiss it. But simple purpose still counts. Being someone who listens well, being steady when others are overwhelmed, creating small moments of calm, showing up quietly, consistently. Not all purpose is loud. Some of it lives in how you treat people, in how you carry yourself through ordinary days, in how you don't make the world heavier just by being in it. If your life feels purposeless right now, it might be because you're looking for something dramatic and missing what's already there. Purpose doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's just the way you exist without giving up on yourself. Purpose often becomes clearer after you stop demanding that it explain your whole life. When you're constantly asking, what am I meant to do? Everything feels heavy. Every choice feels permanent, every step feels like a test, but purpose doesn't need to be a full explanation. Sometimes it's just direction, not destiny. When you allow yourself to live without forcing meaning, something softens. You try things without pressure. You follow curiosity without commitment. You let yourself change your mind, and slowly, patterns form. Not all at once, not dramatically, but enough to show you what feels right and what doesn't. Purpose doesn't arrive when you corner it. It shows up when you give yourself permission to live without answers for a while. Having no purpose right now doesn't mean your life is empty. It means it's unfinished. You're not meant to know everything yet. You're not behind for feeling unsure. You're not wasting time just because you don't have a clear direction. Some seasons are for building, some are for resting, and some are simply for becoming. Without labels, without answers, this space you're in isn't meaningless. It's where you're learning what matters to you by noticing what doesn't. Purpose doesn't arrive as a sudden realization. It grows quietly from the way you keep going, even without certainty. So if all you can do right now is exist, try, and stay curious, that's enough. Your life isn't without purpose. It's just still writing it. I stayed loyal, even when it got hard. Even when we were arguing more than laughing, even when my friends were telling me I deserved better, even when I felt unappreciated, I stayed. Not because I didn't have options, not because I couldn't walk away, but because when I commit fully. Loyalty isn't something I switch on and off depending on how I feel that week. It's a decision, and I made it. I ignored distractions, I curved attention, I shut down conversations that crossed boundaries, not because I was scared of getting caught, but because I respected what we had. So when I found out she didn't stay loyal, it didn't just hurt, it confused me, because how do two people sit in the same relationship and value it completely differently? The part that messed with me wasn't just the betrayal, it was a realization that while I was protecting us, she was exploring her options. While I was defending her name in rooms she wasn't in, she was entertaining someone else's attention. While I was shutting down temptation quietly, she was responding to it, And that imbalance hits deeper than people realize, because loyalty isn't loud. You don't get applause for it. No one congratulates you for not cheating. It's invisible, it's internal, it's discipline. So when you find out the person you were loyal to didn't have that same discipline, it makes you feel stupid for being solid, like you overinvested, like you believed in something that wasn't mutual. I started replaying everything, was she distant because she was already talking to someone else? Were those late replies really just being busy? Was I fighting for something that was already slipping away? Because once trust cracks, your mind rewrites history. You start connecting dots that might not even be there. And that's exhausting, because loyalty is built on trust, and once trust is broken, even your memories feel unstable. I wasn't perfect, but I was faithful. And that matters, because loyalty isn't about being flawless, it's about being intentional. It's about choosing your partner even when temptation is available. It's about respecting boundaries even when no one is watching. And I did that, she didn't. What hurts the most is knowing I would have never done that to her. I wouldn't have risked what we built for a moment of validation. I wouldn't have jeopardized long-term trust for short-term attention, because I understood the weight of betrayal, and she didn't treat it like it was heavy. That's what breaks something inside you, not just the act, the carelessness, because cheating isn't always about love disappearing. Sometimes it's about discipline disappearing. And if someone lacks discipline and loyalty, they'll lack it when things get hard too. For a while I questioned myself. Was I too available, too forgiving, too trusting? Did my loyalty make me predictable? Because when you get betrayed, your brain tries to find ways to avoid feeling powerless again. But here's the truth. My loyalty wasn't weakness, it was character. And her disloyalty wasn't power, it was immaturity. There's a difference. One requires strength, the other requires impulse. People think being cheated on makes you look foolish, but the real foolishness is betraying someone who was solid. I lost someone who didn't value loyalty. She lost someone who actually lived by it. And those are two very different losses, because I can recover, I can heal, I can rebuild. But replacing someone who is genuinely loyal, that's harder than people think. I don't regret staying loyal, even knowing how it ended, because my character doesn't shift based on someone else's behavior. I don't cheat because I'm angry. I don't entertain options because I'm bored. I don't step out because things feel heavy. If I'm unhappy, I leave. I don't betray, and that standard stays with me, not for her, for me. The scary part after betrayal is this: you start wondering if loyalty is even worth it, if everyone cheats eventually, if trusting deeply just makes you vulnerable. But I refuse to let someone else's lack of integrity change mine, because loyalty isn't outdated, it's rare. And rare doesn't mean foolish, it means valuable. She didn't stay loyal, but that says nothing about my worth. It says everything about her discipline, her boundaries, her emotional maturity. Because if someone can look at loyalty and still step outside it, they were never anchored. And I don't want someone who floats when things get tested. I want someone who stands. I stayed loyal, even when it was inconvenient, even when it was tempting not to, even when I felt underappreciated, and I'll stay that way. Not because everyone deserves it, but because I deserve to be someone who lives by principle. She didn't stay loyal, and that hurt, but I'd rather be the one who was solid than the one who couldn't hold a commitment. Because loyalty doesn't make you weak, it makes you rare, and one day someone will recognize that instead of testing it. I really thought she was different, not in a cliche way, not in that she's not like other girls type of thinking. I mean, I genuinely believe she moved differently, because from the start she didn't feel like everyone else. She listened, she asked questions, she made it seem like she actually cared about what I was saying, and that's rare, especially now. So when I felt that kind of energy from her, I didn't hesitate. I opened up, I let my guard down faster than I normally would, because when you think someone is different, you stop protecting yourself the same way. You start believing this might actually be something real, and for a while, it felt like it was. The conversations were easy. Nothing felt forced. It felt like we were naturally building something without trying too hard. And that's what convinced me the most, because real connections aren't supposed to feel complicated. They're supposed to feel natural. So I leaned into it, I gave her my time, my attention, my energy, and I didn't second guess it, because in my head I wasn't just talking to someone random. I was building with someone who was different. At least that's what I thought. The more I talked to her, the more convinced I became that she wasn't like everyone else, because she didn't play games. At least it didn't feel like she did. She replied consistently. She didn't disappear randomly. She made the effort to keep conversations going. And when you've dealt with enough inconsistency before, that kind of energy stands out. It feels real, so I trusted it. I stopped overthinking things. I stopped questioning her intentions, because when someone shows you consistency, it feels like proof. Proof that they're serious, proof that they're different, proof that this might actually go somewhere. And that's when I started investing more, not just time, but emotionally. I started letting her see parts of me I don't usually show right away. The way I think, the things I've been through, the way I actually feel about certain things, because I thought she was someone who would understand it, someone who wouldn't take that lightly, and she made it seem like she didn't. She would listen, she would respond in a way that felt genuine. She made it feel like what I was saying actually mattered to her, and that's what pulled me in deeper, because attention is one thing, but understanding, that's different, or at least it's supposed to be. But what I didn't realize at the time was this: just because someone understands you doesn't mean they value you the way you think they do. That realization didn't hit me right away. At first, everything still felt real, because when someone listens to you, understands you, and responds in a way that feels genuine, it's easy to believe they care on a deeper level. And I did. I thought she saw me. Not just the surface version, but the real version. And that's not something I give out easily. For the more she showed that side of herself, the more I leaned in, the more I believed this wasn't temporary. But slowly, things started shifting. Not in a dramatic way, nothing obvious, just small changes. Her replies weren't as consistent. The energy in conversations felt a little different. The effort started feeling slightly uneven. At first I ignored it, because when you believe someone is different, you don't immediately assume they're changing. You assume something else is going on. Maybe she's busy, maybe she's stressed, maybe she just needs space. So I stayed patient. I didn't pull back. I didn't question her. I just kept showing up the same way I always did. Because in my mind, you don't give up on something real just because it feels off for a moment. But here's the thing I didn't realize yet. When someone is actually different, their consistency doesn't disappear without explanation. That's when I started noticing something I didn't want to admit. The version of her I thought was different only existed in certain moments, not consistently. Because when everything was good, she showed up fully. She was present, engaged, easy to talk to. But when something shifted, even slightly, that same energy disappeared, and that's where the confusion started, because now I wasn't just dealing with inconsistency, I was dealing with contrast. One day it felt real, the next day it felt distant, and when you've seen someone at their best, it's hard to accept their worst. So instead of questioning the connection, I started chasing the version of her I thought was real, the version that listened, the version that understood, the version that made everything feel easy. I kept telling myself, that's who she really is, and maybe sometimes it was. But here's the truth I had to face: if someone only shows up for you sometimes, that's not who they are. That's just who they are when it's convenient. And I didn't want to believe that, because admitting that meant admitting something bigger, that maybe she wasn't different. I just experienced her best moments and mistook them for her whole character. Once I accepted that the different version of her wasn't consistent, something else started becoming clear. I wasn't reacting to who she actually was. I was reacting to who I thought she was. And that's a dangerous place to be, because when you build feelings based on someone's best moments, you start ignoring their patterns. You hold on to the highs and excuse the lows. You remember how good it felt when everything clicked, and you convince yourself that version of them is the real one. So every time she pulled away, I didn't take it at face value. I told myself she'll come back to how she was. Every time the energy dropped, I didn't question it. I just stayed consistent, hoping things would reset. And sometimes they did. She would come back, the conversations would feel right again, the connection would feel easy again, and those moments would convince me all over again that she was different. But now, I understand something I didn't see back then. Those moments weren't proof of consistency, they were just temporary alignment. And temporary alignment feels real when you want something to work, but real connection doesn't come and go like that. It stays. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something I didn't want to admit. I wasn't in a stable connection. I was in a cycle of highs and lows that kept resetting my feelings every time things felt good again. Because every time she came back with that same energy, the version of her that felt easy, understanding, and real, it made me forget everything that didn't make sense. It made me forget the distance, the inconsistency, the moments where I felt like I was the only one holding it together. And that's how cycles keep you stuck. They give you just enough to stay, but never enough to feel secure. And I confused that with something meaningful. I thought the fact that we could get back to that good place meant something. I thought it meant the connection was strong enough to survive anything. But now I understand something clearly. If something keeps breaking and resetting, it's not strong, it's unstable, and I was calling instability different because I didn't want to accept that it wasn't what I thought it was. At some point, I had to stop focusing on how she was in her best moments and start paying attention to how she showed up consistently, because consistency tells you the truth, not the highlights, not the good days, not the moments where everything feels perfect. Consistency. And when I looked at that honestly, the picture changed. She wasn't always there, she wasn't always present, she wasn't always giving the same energy I was. And that's when it hit me. Someone who is actually different doesn't make you feel unsure about where you stand. They don't make you question their effort. They don't make you feel like you're chasing clarity. They give you that clarity naturally, and I didn't have that. I had moments of clarity mixed with long stretches of confusion, and confusion isn't what different feels like. Once I stopped chasing the version of her I wanted, everything started making more sense, because the truth is, she didn't change. I just started seeing her clearly. She was consistent in one way. She showed up when it was easy, when the energy was good, when the conversations were light, when everything felt natural. But when things required depth, consistency, effort over time, that's when the difference showed. And that's when I had to admit something to myself. She wasn't different in the way I thought. She was just different from what I was used to at the beginning. And I held on to that version too long. For a while, that realization hurt more than anything else, because it made me feel like I misread everything, like I believed in something that wasn't actually there. But over time, I started understanding something important. I didn't imagine a connection. Those moments were real. They just weren't sustainable. And that's the difference. Something can feel real in the moment and still not be built to last. And I think that's what I experienced. Not something fake, just something temporary that I thought was permanent. So yeah, I thought she was different, and in some ways she was. She showed me a version of connection that felt real. She made it easy to open up. She made it feel like something deeper was possible. But being different at the beginning isn't the same as being consistent in the long run. And that's the lesson I had to learn, because the right person isn't just different when things are good, They're consistent when things aren't. They don't come and go. They don't leave you guessing. They don't make you question what you felt. They match it every time, so no. She wasn't the kind of different I thought she was, but now I know what real different actually looks like. And next time, I won't confuse moments for meaning. Don't waste your teenage years obsessing over love. It's easy to fall into that trap. You watch movies, shows, social media, high school sweethearts, perfect relationships, young love that looks magical from the outside, so you start thinking you need that too. Like, if you don't experience love early, you're missing out on something important, so you chase it. You talk to people just to not be alone. You stay in situations that don't feel right just so you can say you're with someone. You keep trying to make things work that clearly aren't working, and slowly, without realizing it, it starts tearing you down. Your confidence drops, your sense of self gets blurry, you stop knowing who you are outside of liking someone or wanting to be liked back. Your mood depends on replies, attention, validation, and that's dangerous at that age. When you're young, you're not supposed to have everything figured out. You're supposed to be discovering who you are, what you like, what you stand for, what kind of person you want to become. But when all your energy goes into chasing relationships, you neglect that part of yourself. You start building your identity around other people instead of building it from within. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most teenage relationships don't last, not because you did something wrong, not because love isn't real, but because you're both still growing, still changing, still figuring life out, and forcing love before you even know yourself is like trying to build something on an unstable foundation. It cracks every time. If something isn't flowing naturally, stop forcing it. Love isn't supposed to feel like constant stress, chasing, or proving your worth. If it's meant to happen, it won't require you to lose yourself to keep it. And the thing nobody wants to hear? Desperation pushes people away. Confidence attracts them. When you stop hunting for love and start working on yourself, things shift. You become more grounded, more secure, more you. And that's when real connections show up naturally. You still have so much life ahead of you, so much fun to have, so many experiences that don't revolve around relationships. Don't let anxiety over love rob you of your youth. Love will come, but it shouldn't come at the cost of who you are. Right now, the most important relationship you can build is the one with yourself. Here's what happens when you slow down and stop chasing love so hard. You start hearing yourself again, your own thoughts, your own wants. You realize how much noise you were living with, always wondering if someone liked you back, always questioning where you stood, always trying to be enough for someone who barely knew who they were either. When you're young, your heart is open, but your identity is still forming. That's a dangerous mix. You attach quickly because you don't yet have roots in yourself. So when something ends, it doesn't just hurt, it shakes your entire sense of worth. You don't just lose a person, you lose who you thought you were with them. That's why breakups feel world-ending at that age. Not because the love was deeper, but because you were still becoming you. And every time something falls apart, you start questioning yourself instead of realizing it was just part of growth. When you step back from chasing relationships, you give yourself room to breathe. Room to build confidence that isn't dependent on attention. Room to develop interests, skills, goals. Room to fail at things that don't involve your heart breaking. And those failures, they teach you way more than forcing a relationship ever could. You also learn how to be alone without feeling lonely. That's huge, because once you can enjoy your own company, you stop settling for people who treat you like an option. You stop forcing conversations. You stop chasing mixed signals. You start choosing peace over drama, and the wild part is, once you stop looking desperate for love, you become more attractive without trying, not because you change your appearance, but because you carry yourself differently. You're not reaching for validation anymore. You're grounded, you're present, you're whole on your own. Love hits different when it finds you like that. when it comes from alignment instead of need, when it adds to your life instead of becoming your life. So don't rush it, don't force it, don't let relationships define you before you even know yourself. There's no prize for loving early, but there is power in loving wisely. Here's what happens when you slow down and stop chasing love so hard. You start hearing yourself again, your own thoughts, your own wants. You realize how much noise you were living with, always wondering if someone liked you back, always questioning where you stood, always trying to be enough for someone who barely knew who they were either. When you're young, your heart is open, but your identity is still forming. That's a dangerous mix. You attach quickly because you don't yet have roots in yourself. So when something ends, it doesn't just hurt, it shakes your entire sense of worth. You don't just lose a person, you lose who you thought you were with them. That's why breakups feel world-ending at that age. Not because the love was deeper, but because you were still becoming you. And every time something falls apart, you start questioning yourself instead of realizing it was just part of growth. When you step back from chasing relationships, you give yourself room to breathe, room to build confidence that isn't dependent on attention, room to develop interests, skills, goals, room to fail at things that don't involve your heart breaking. And those failures, they teach you way more than forcing a relationship ever could. You also learn how to be alone without feeling lonely. That's huge, because once you can enjoy your own company, you stop settling for people who treat you like an option. You stop forcing conversations. You stop chasing mixed signals. You start choosing peace over drama. And the wild part is, once you stop looking desperate for love, you become more attractive without trying. Not because you changed your appearance, but because you carry yourself differently. You're not reaching for validation anymore. You're grounded, you're present, you're whole on your own. Love hits different when it finds you like that, when it comes from alignment instead of need, when it adds to your life instead of becoming your life. So don't rush it, don't force it, don't let relationships define you before you even know yourself. There's no prize for loving early, but there is power in loving wisely. The truth is, love isn't something you're late to. There's no deadline where if you don't find it by a certain age you've failed. That pressure is made up. It comes from comparison, from watching other people's highlights and assuming they're ahead of you. But everyone's path is different, and forcing yourself to keep up only makes you miss what's right in front of you. When you focus on yourself first, something happens. You stop romanticizing every connection. You stop projecting futures onto people who haven't even earned a place in your present. You start asking better questions, not just, do they like me? And do I even like how I feel around? That shift changes everything. You realize that love shouldn't drain you. It shouldn't make you anxious all the time. It shouldn't make you abandon your goals, your friendships, or your sense of direction. Real love fits into your life, it doesn't consume it. And you can't recognize that until you've spent time building a life you actually care about. This is also when you learn patience. Not the kind where you wait around hoping someone chooses you, but the kind where you trust that what's meant for you won't require you to chase it down. You stop running toward people and start walking toward yourself. And ironically, that's when people start noticing you more. Because confidence isn't loud. It's calm. It's knowing you're okay whether someone stays or goes. It's choosing people who choose you back without hesitation. And that kind of energy doesn't come from trying to be loved. It comes from being at peace with who you are. So don't rush love. Don't let loneliness make your decision. Don't let movies or social media convince you you're behind, you're not behind, you're building. And when love does show up, real love, you'll be ready for it, not desperate for it. One day you'll look back and realize how important this time was, not because of who you dated or didn't date, but because of who you became when no one was choosing you romantically. These are the years where you learn discipline, where you learn how to sit with discomfort instead of running to someone to distract you from it, where you learn how to build something that lasts longer than a temporary connection. When you stop making love the center of your world, you start seeing everything else clearly. Your friendships get stronger, your goals feel more meaningful, Your confidence comes from progress, not attention, and you realize how dangerous it is to let someone else be the source of your happiness before you even know how to create it yourself. This is also when you start setting standards instead of expectations. Expectations are hoping someone becomes what you want. Standards are knowing what you will and won't accept. And standards only come from self-respect. You don't develop that by chasing validation. You develop it by choosing yourself consistently. There's a version of you that exists when you're not worried about being loved. That version is focused, curious, hungry for growth. That version doesn't beg to be chosen because he knows his value isn't determined by who stays. And that's the version of you that real love is actually drawn to. So let love be something that complements your life, not something that defines. Let relationships come from alignment, not loneliness. And trust that when the timing is right, when you're solid in who you are, love won't feel like something you have to chase. It'll feel like something that finally makes sense. You're not missing out, you're preparing. What people don't talk about enough is how much damage comes from learning love the wrong way too early. When you grow up thinking love is supposed to be chaotic, unstable, and uncertain, you carry that blueprint into adulthood. You start associating butterflies with anxiety. You mistake emotional inconsistency for passion, and you end up chasing people who mirror the same confusion you never heal. That's why taking time for yourself isn't selfish. It's preventative. It teaches you how to recognize healthy connection when it finally appears, because healthy love doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't make you question your worth. It doesn't feel like you're constantly auditioning to be chosen. When you build yourself first, you stop trying to earn love. You expect it to be mutual. You expect effort to be consistent. You expect respect to be automatic. And if it's not there, you walk away without turning it into a personal failure. You also learn how to love without losing yourself. You keep your routines, your goals, your sense of direction. Love becomes something that adds warmth to your life, not something that replaces, and that balance is something you can only learn when you've spent time standing on your own. The biggest mistake isn't being alone when you're young. The mistake is tying your self-worth to relationships before you understand who you are without. You don't need someone to complete you. You need to complete yourself enough that love becomes a choice, not a necessity. So let yourself grow. Let yourself evolve without pressure. Let love meet you when you're ready to share your life, not escape, because the strongest love stories don't start with desperation. They start with self-respect. Eventually, you reach a point where you realize how quiet confidence actually feels. It's not loud, it's not flexing, it's not proving anything to anyone, it's waking up knowing, even if no one texts you today, you're still okay, that your life still has direction, that your worth didn't disappear because someone didn't choose you. That's the version of you love is meant to meet. When you're young, it's easy to think love will save you, that once you find the right person, everything else will fall into place. But real growth teaches you the opposite. You build the life first, you build stability, purpose, discipline, and self-respect. And then love fits into that life naturally, instead of becoming the thing you rely on to feel whole. This is why rushing relationships too early can stunt you. You start making decisions based on fear of losing someone instead of what's best for your future. You compromise your goal. You stay small to keep someone comfortable, and you don't even realize it's happening until you look back and feel behind. Taking time for yourself isn't missing. It's an investment. Every day you spend learning who you are, strengthening your mind, improving your habits, and building something meaningful is setting you up for a healthier connection later. One where love doesn't feel like pressure, but partnership. And when that love finally comes, you won't feel like you're holding your breath. You won't feel anxious or unsure. You'll feel steady, chosen, at peace. That's how you'll know you didn't rush. One day, love will find you when you're not looking for. not because you gave up on it, but because you stopped needing it to validate you. You'll meet someone when you're comfortable in your own skin, when your life already has meaning, and when you're not trying to fill a void with another person. And when that happens, it won't feel like chaos, it won't feel like chasing or guessing or proving. It'll feel natural, balanced, safe, like two people choosing each other, not out of loneliness, but out of intention. You'll be glad you didn't rush. You'll be grateful for the nights you spent alone building yourself instead of forcing something that would have only distracted. You'll realize that the love you were searching for externally was something you were always meant to cultivate internally first. So if you're young and feeling behind, if you're single and feeling pressured, breathe. If you're watching everyone else pair up and wondering when it'll be your turn, trust the timing. Love isn't a race. And your life isn't measured by who you dated in your teens. Protect your peace, enjoy being young. The rest will come. You know what actually hurts? Wanting to be in love, but realizing you can't stay in it. You finally meet someone good. They're kind. They're loyal. They care about you in a way that feels real. On paper, they're everything you're supposed to want. And for a moment you think, maybe this is it. But then they like you back. And something in you shuts off. Not slowly, not gently. It's like the feeling disappears overnight. You try to force it. You tell yourself to be grateful. You try to match their energy, their effort, their love. But instead of growing closer, you start pulling away. You notice flaws that didn't bother you before. You get irritated over small things. You find reasons to create distance. And suddenly you're the problem. On the outside, it looks like you're sabotaging something good. Like you're avoiding someone who treats you right. But inside it feels worse than that. It feels suffocating, because even when you try to stay, it feels like you're trapped in something you can't feel the way you're supposed to. The messed up part, you still care. Somewhere deep down you don't want to hurt them. You don't want to be cold. You don't want to be the reason someone feels unwanted, but you also don't know how to love them without losing yourself. And that kind of conflict turns love into guilt. What's confusing about this feeling is that it only shows up with the right kind of person, not the chaotic ones, not the ones who make you anxious, not the ones who disappear and keep you guessing. It happens with the ones who are steady, the ones who reply, who show up, who don't play games with your emotions. And instead of feeling safe, your body reacts like something's wrong. You don't feel excitement, you feel pressure, not because they're asking for too much, but because they're offering consistency, and you don't know how to relax inside it. There's no chase, no uncertainty, no emotional roller coaster to distract you. So your mind starts searching for escape routes. You tell yourself you're bored, that the spark is gone, that something feels off, and even if you can't explain why. But deep down, it's not disinterest, it's unfamiliarity, because when you're used to love being unstable, peace can feel empty. And when you're used to earning affection, being chosen freely can feel undeserved. So instead of leaning in, you pull away, you create distance so you can breathe again, not because they're hurting you, but because closeness is touching something unhealed. And that's the part nobody prepares you for. Sometimes the problem isn't that you don't want love, it's that you've never learned how to stay when love doesn't hurt. At some point, this starts to mess with how you see yourself, because now you're not just confused, you're guilty. You look at them and think, yeah, they didn't do anything wrong. They're patient, they're kind, they're trying, and you're the one pulling back. So you start labeling yourself cold, broken, unappreciative, the person who ruins good things. From the outside, it looks simple. Why would you walk away from someone who treats you right? But what they don't see is how trapped you feel inside the expectation to feel something you can't force. You don't hate them. You hate the pressure to become the version of yourself that knows how to stay. So instead of being honest, you distance yourself, you reply slower, you stop initiating, You hope they'll lose interest so you don't have to explain yourself, and that's the part that hurts the most, not losing them, hurting someone who didn't deserve it. You carry that with you, the knowledge that somewhere someone is wondering what they did wrong, when the truth is, you just didn't know how to receive what they were offering. And that realization sits heavy, because wanting love but not knowing how to hold it feels like a flaw you can't explain, only live with. Avoidance doesn't come from not caring, it comes from caring too much and not knowing how to say it. Because how do you explain something like this without sounding cruel? How do you tell someone, you're good to me, but I don't feel what I'm supposed to feel? There's no gentle way to say that. So instead of explaining, you disappear emotionally. You convince yourself silence is kinder. That distance will hurt less than honesty, but silence creates its own kind of damage. They feel it, the shift, the hesitation, the way your energy isn't the same anymore, and you feel it too. Every message feels heavier. Every interaction feels like a reminder that you're failing at something that should be simple, so you keep avoiding the conversation, hoping clarity will show up on its own, but it doesn't. All that grows is resentment, not toward them, but toward yourself, because now you're stuck between two fears, hurting them by telling the truth, or hurting them slowly by pulling away. And avoidance feels safer in the moment because it delays the guilt, but it doesn't remove it, it just stretches it out. And the longer you stay quiet, the harder it becomes to speak honestly at all. If you look closer, this pattern isn't about them at all. It's about what closeness brings up in you, because real healthy affection doesn't distract you from yourself. It brings you face to face with things you buried, old fears, old wounds, old beliefs about what love costs. When someone is consistent, there's nowhere to hide. You can't blame mixed signals, you can't blame distance, you can't blame uncertainty. All that's left is you, and the part of you that learned early on that love comes with pressure. Pressure to be enough, pressure to stay, pressure to not mess it up. So your system does what it learned to do best. It pulls away before it can fail. Avoidance isn't rejection, it's self-protection. You're not running from them, you're running from the version of yourself that feels exposed when someone chooses you fully. Because being wanted means being seen. And being seen means being vulnerable in ways you never learned were safe. So your mind flips the switch, you call it disinterest, you call it boredom, you call it not feeling it, but underneath all of that is fear, not of losing them, but of losing control. Eventually a realization starts to creep in. This isn't about love failing, it's about healing that hasn't happened yet. Because when someone offers you something real, it presses on the places you never finished healing, not because they're doing anything wrong, but because closeness exposes what avoidance kept quiet. Love asks questions you've been dodging. It asks you to be present. It asks you to trust consistency. It asks you to stay when things feel uncomfortable instead of dramatic. And if your past taught you that love comes with loss, your body reacts before your mind can explain it. So instead of leaning in, you shut down, not because you don't care, but because caring activates fear, fear of dependency, fear of responsibility, fear of becoming someone who needs another person, because somewhere along the way, you learned that needing someone meant giving them the power to hurt you. So when love shows up calm and steady, your nervous system mistakes it for danger, and you don't realize what's happening until later, after you've already pulled away, after you've already created distance, after you've already blamed yourself. But this moment matters because once you see that this isn't disinterest, it's unhealed fear, you stop calling yourself broken, you start calling it what it is, a signal. Once you see the pattern, something changes, not overnight, not perfectly, but you stop running on autopilot. You start noticing the moment your body wants to pull away, the urge to detach, the instinct to create distance the second things feel real, and instead of obeying it immediately, you pause. You ask yourself, am I actually uninterested? Or am I uncomfortable? That question alone changes everything, because discomfort isn't a red flag, it's a signal. It tells you something important is happening. something unfamiliar, something that requires presence instead of escape. So instead of disappearing, you stay a little longer. You don't force feelings, you don't fake certainty. You just allow yourself to exist inside the discomfort without punishing it. You start choosing honesty over avoidance, not brutal honesty, gentle honesty. I'm confused, I'm scared, I don't know what I'm feeling yet. And for the first time, connection doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like practice. Practice staying, practice communicating, practice letting someone see you without immediately taking that away. You realize something important here. You don't have to feel everything at once. You don't have to be sure. You just have to stop abandoning yourself the moment love asks you to be present. At the end of all this, you start to understand something clearly. Love was never the problem. Fear was. Fear was the thing turning care into pressure. Fear was the thing making peace feel boring. Fear was the thing convincing you that pulling away was safer than staying. When fear stops leading, love feels different. It's quieter, slower, less dramatic. It doesn't hit like chaos. It doesn't demand certainty right away. It doesn't make you feel trapped. It gives you space to exist without disappearing. Real love doesn't ask you to force feelings. It doesn't punish confusion. It doesn't make you feel like you're failing for needing time. It lets you grow into it, and when you stop running, you realize something important. Caring doesn't mean losing yourself. Staying doesn't mean being stuck. And choosing someone doesn't mean giving up control. It just means you're present. You're allowed to learn how to love differently than you were taught. You're allowed to take it slow. You're allowed to feel unsure without self-sabotaging. And most of all, you're allowed to stop hating yourself for struggling with something you were never shown how to do safely, because the moment love stops being about fear is the moment it finally starts feeling real. Maybe I'm not hard to love. Maybe I'm just not someone people stay for, because they come close, they get attached, they say they care, they act invested, and then something shifts, they pull back, they get unsure, they choose easier. And after it happens enough times, you stop blaming timing. You start blaming yourself. You start wondering if you're good for the moment, but not for the long term. If you're exciting, but not secure. If you're lovable, but not keepable. And that thought sits heavy, because being left doesn't just hurt your heart. It makes you question your value. When almost relationships keep happening, your brain starts building a story, a quiet one. It says, people like you, but they don't stay. And once that narrative forms, everything starts filtering through it. If someone takes longer to reply, you assume they're losing interest. If someone pulls back slightly, you assume it's the beginning of the end. Because you've seen this pattern before, you've felt the slow fade, the shift in tone, the subtle detachment. So now even when something feels good, you brace yourself. Not because you're negative, because you're tired of being surprised. And the scary part, you start expecting abandonment before it even happens. You hold back. You don't get too excited. You don't fully relax, because deep down, you're preparing for them to leave. Not because you're unlovable, but because repetition turned into belief. Fully relax into the connection. Because fully relax into the connection. Because what's the point if it's temporary anyway? You become hyper-aware, watching for changes, tracking energy shifts, reading into silence, and sometimes, without realizing it, you create distance first. You pull back slightly, you act less invested, you test their consistency, not to play games, but to protect yourself, because if they're gonna leave, you'd rather see it coming. But here's the hard truth. When you show up guarded, you don't give love the chance to feel safe. Not because you're toxic, not because you're difficult, but because you're tired. Tired of being surprised, tired of being left, tired of being the one who cares more. So you half show up, and then when it ends, it feels like confirmation. See? They left again. But maybe it's not that you're someone people don't stay for. Maybe it's that you're still healing from the last time they didn't. There's a difference between being left and choosing people who were never built to stay. That's the part we don't always see, because when someone walks away, it feels personal, it feels like they evaluated you, and decided you weren't enough. But look closer. Were they consistent from the start? Were they clear about their intentions? Were they emotionally available or just present? Sometimes the pattern isn't that you're not worth staying for. It's that you keep giving your depth to people who only plan to visit. People who like connection but fear commitment. People who enjoy intimacy but avoid responsibility. And when they leave, it reinforces the narrative. No one stays. But maybe the better question is, who have I been choosing? Because when you stop choosing emotionally unavailable people, the pattern changes. Not instantly, not magically, but gradually. You realize you were never hard to stay for, you were just staying with people who were temporary. At some point, you stop chasing permanence, you stop trying to lock something in before it's solid, stop over-investing just to make it last, stop forcing potential into commitment because you realize something. You can't convince someone to stay. You can't love someone into being ready. You can't perform your way into permanence. So instead of gripping tighter, you loosen your hold. You let people show you who they are. You stop rushing labels. Stop fantasizing futures before foundations exist. And something interesting happens when you're no longer desperate for someone to stay. You start attracting people who actually want to. Because permanence isn't built through pressure, it's built through alignment. You don't chase it, you allow it. And when someone stays without being forced, without being convinced, without being chased, it feels different. Not fragile, not uncertain, just steady. At some point, the fear shifts. It stops being, they're going to leave, and becomes, if they do, I'll be okay. That's confidence, not the loud kind, not the I don't care kind. The steady kind. You stop gripping so tightly. You stop overanalyzing every shift. You stop trying to secure permanence too early because you know this. If someone stays, it's because they want to, not because you convinced them, not because you performed perfectly, not because you minimized yourself. And if they leave, it doesn't collapse your identity. It doesn't confirm you're unworthy. It just confirms they weren't aligned. You're not scared of people leaving anymore. You're more concerned with whether they're capable of staying. And that's different because now you're not auditioning, you're observing. And the people who are meant to stay, they won't need to be chased. They won't need to be monitored. They won't need to be reminded. They'll just stay. Being someone people stay for starts with staying true to yourself first, because when you abandon yourself to keep someone else, you teach them that you'll tolerate instability. You over-adjust, over-forgive, overextend. You bend your boundaries so they don't feel pressured. You silence your needs so they don't feel overwhelmed. And slowly, you're the one disappearing. But here's the shift. The more you stay grounded in who you are, the less you attract people who only plan to pass through. When you communicate clearly, when you hold your standards calmly, when you don't chase mixed signals, the wrong people leave faster. And that's not loss, that's filtering. You don't become someone people stay for by shrinking yourself into convenience. You become that by being steady in your worth. The right person won't stay because you made it easy. They'll stay because they respect what you stand on. The right love doesn't feel like survival. It doesn't feel like holding your breath. It doesn't feel like waiting for the other shoe to drop. It doesn't feel like constantly proving you're worth keeping. It feels stable, not boring, not forced, stable. You're not overthinking every text. You're not tracking effort. You're not wondering if today is the day they change their mind. You just feel secure, and that's what you've been craving this whole time. Not obsession, not intensity, not dramatic passion, stability. Because when someone is truly staying, you don't have to fight for reassurance. You don't have to shrink. You don't have to overperform. You don't have to prepare for abandonment. You get to relax. And if you've never experienced that, of course, you start thinking maybe you're not someone people stay for, but maybe you've just never been with someone capable of stable love. There's a difference. At some point, you stop fearing being left. You start expecting to be valued. That's the real shift. You don't walk into connections thinking, how long will this last? You walk in thinking, if this is aligned, it will stay. You stop preparing for abandonment. Stop bracing for the slow fade. Stop assuming you'll have to fight to be kept, because now you know something. If someone leaves, it doesn't mean you weren't worth staying for. It means they weren't built to stay. And instead of internalizing it, you let it pass. You don't collapse. You don't spiral. You don't rewrite your worth. You understand that being valued is the bare minimum. And once you truly believe that, you stop entertaining anything less. You don't chase clarity. You don't beg for reassurance. You don't accept confusion. You expect effort. You expect consistency. You expect intention. And the people who can't offer that, they filter themselves out. So, am I just not someone people stay for? No, I just stopped staying where I'm not valued. There's a difference. For a long time, I thought people leaving was proof that I wasn't enough, not interesting enough, not secure enough, not worth committing to long term. But now I see it clearly. The wrong people didn't stay because they were never meant to build. They were meant to teach. Teach me what inconsistency feels like. Teach me what mixed signals look like. Teach me what I will never accept again. And once you learn that, you stop chasing permanence. You stop trying to be easier. You stop overproving. You stop bending yourself into something digestible because you realize this. You are absolutely someone people stay for. Just not people who are unsure, not people who love halfway, not people who need options. The right person won't need convincing. They won't need time to decide your worth. They won't feel overwhelmed by your depth. They'll feel steady. And this time, if someone leaves, you won't question your value. You'll question their capacity because you're no longer asking, well, why don't people stay? You're asking, are they capable of staying at my level? And that's the shift. You keep ignoring the red flags because all you want is love, not peace, not respect, not consistency, just love. You see the signs, you see the unanswered calls, the constant busy, the way you're always an option, never a priority. And instead of asking why it hurts, you ask how to endure it. You tell yourself it's patience, that it's loyalty, that love means staying even when it costs you. But let's be honest, she doesn't check on you. She doesn't consider your feelings. She doesn't show up the way you do. And you know that. You just don't want to face what it says about you for staying. So here's the real question you've been avoiding. How much do you actually love yourself? Because when you stay in situations that keep hurting you, when you keep accepting disrespect just to feel close to someone, that's not love. That's neglect. If you truly loved yourself, you wouldn't keep choosing pain just to feel wanted. You wouldn't keep lowering your standards to keep someone around who clearly isn't choosing you back. But you don't protect yourself, you sacrifice yourself. Because being alone scares you more than being hurt. And that's why you accept the bare minimum. That's why you stay in toxic cycles. That's why you confuse attachment with love. You're not holding on because it's good for you. You're holding on because it's the only version of love you think you deserve. And that's the lie. You don't need someone else to complete you. What you actually need is to stop outsourcing your worth. Because the moment you start loving yourself, really loving yourself, you stop begging for attention. You stop tolerating disrespect. You stop calling pain connection. You stop chasing people who only show up halfway. Self-love doesn't make you selfish. It makes you unavailable to anything that keeps breaking you. And until you learn that, you'll keep calling suffering love and calling survival loyalty. You are worth more than crumbs. You are worth more than confusion. You are worth more than being an option. But no one can convince you of that until you decide to believe it yourself. Here's the truth you keep avoiding. You don't stay because you don't see the red flags. You stay because you think leaving means nobody else will love you. So you make excuses. She's busy. She's going through stuff. She just doesn't show love the same way. But effort isn't a love language. It's a choice. And when someone keeps choosing not to show up for you, That's not confusion, that's clarity. You're not being patient. You're being hopeful in a place that's already shown you who it is. You keep giving grace to people who wouldn't give you the same. You keep explaining your pain to someone who already decided it wasn't important enough to change. And every time you stay, you send yourself a message. My feelings come second. My needs are optional. This is the best I can get. That's not love. That's self-betrayal. You think walking away means losing them. But what you're really losing right now is respect for yourself, because someone who values you doesn't make you question your worth. They don't make you beg for consistency. They don't disappear and call it space. And the reason this keeps happening isn't because you love too hard. It's because you don't love yourself hard enough to leave when you should. The moment you start choosing yourself, red flags stop looking like obstacles and start looking like exits. And exits aren't failures, they're protection. Ignoring red flags doesn't just hurt you once, it trains people how to treat you. Every time you stay after disrespect, you teach them you'll tolerate it. Every time you forgive without change, you show them your boundaries don't mean much, and they adjust accordingly. They respond less, they try less, they care just enough to keep you around, but never enough to show up fully. Because why would they? You already proved you'll stay without effort. You think you're being understanding, but what you're really doing is normalizing behavior that shouldn't have access to you. You answer late replies immediately. You accept apologies without accountability. You let patterns repeat because you're afraid of starting over, and slowly, your standards drop while their comfort rises. That's the trade you're making. You're giving someone emotional safety while you live in emotional uncertainty. And the worst part? You start blaming yourself. You tell yourself you're asking for too much, that you're sensitive, that this is just how relationships are. But healthy love doesn't require endurance. You don't have to survive it. You don't have to fight for basic respect. You don't have to convince someone to treat you well. Red flags aren't challenges to overcome. They're warnings to listen to, and the longer you ignore them, the harder it becomes to remember what being valued even feels like. The pattern doesn't break when they change, it breaks when you do. The reason you keep ignoring red flags is because you confuse attachment with love. Love feels steady, attachment feels urgent. Love doesn't make you anxious. Attachment keeps you checking your phone, replaying conversations, wondering where you stand, and you call that passion. But what you're really feeling is fear. Fear of being replaced, fear of not being enough, fear that if you don't hold on tight, you'll be forgotten. So you cling, you stay when you should leave, you wait when there's nothing coming. You accept excuses because they're easier than facing the truth. That truth being, someone who wants you won't make you feel optional. Attachment makes you chase because it needs reassurance. Love doesn't chase, it meets. And until you learn the difference, every red flag will feel like something you just need to work through. You'll keep calling distance space, disrespect miscommunication, inconsistency timing, but your body already knows that tight feeling in your chest, that constant unease, that feeling of giving more than you're getting. That's not love warning you to try harder. That's your self-respect telling you to stop. You don't need clearer signs. You don't need closure. You don't need one more conversation. You need the courage to admit that attachment is keeping you stuck in places love would never ask you to stay. Walking away feels harder than staying because staying lets you avoid the truth. As long as you're still there, you can tell yourself it might change, that maybe tomorrow they'll care more, that maybe you're just being tested. Hope keeps you stuck because leaving means admitting you invested in something that wasn't good for you. It means admitting you ignored your instincts, that you stayed longer than you should have, that you loved someone who couldn't meet you halfway. And that hurts your pride. So instead, you endure. You tell yourself pain is temporary, that love requires sacrifice, that every relationship has rough patches. But here's the part you don't want to hear. Love doesn't consistently make you feel small. It doesn't drain you. It doesn't confuse you. It doesn't make you feel like you're asking for too much just by wanting basic respect. You stay because leaving forces accountability, not for them, but for you. It forces you to ask why you accepted less, why you ignored the signs, why you stayed quiet when your boundaries were crossed. And that's uncomfortable. But staying is costing you more than leaving ever will. Every day you remain in a situation that disrespects you, you reinforce the belief that this is all you deserve, and that belief is the real damage. Walking away isn't giving up on love, it's giving up on self-betrayal. And the moment you finally choose yourself, red flags stop feeling confusing. They feel obvious. The moment you stop ignoring red flags, everything gets quiet. No chaos, no anxiety spikes, no constant checking to see if someone still wants you. And at first, that silence feels uncomfortable because you're used to confusion, used to emotional ups and downs, used to love feeling like something you have to manage. So when you finally walk away, your brain starts questioning you. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe this is just how love feels. But that's just withdrawal. You're not missing them. You're missing the familiarity of the pattern because ignoring red flags wasn't just about them. It was about what you were willing to tolerate to avoid being alone. Now that you've chosen yourself, you start seeing things clearly. You realize how drained you were, how often you made excuses, how little you were actually asking for compared to how much you were giving, and that clarity changes you. You don't feel pulled toward inconsistency anymore. You don't chase mixed signals. You don't feel tempted by people who only show up halfway. Because once you experience peace, chaos stops feeling exciting. You stop romanticizing struggle. You stop believing love has to hurt. You stop confusing anxiety with connection. And here's the biggest shift. You stop trying to be chosen. You start choosing. Who gets access to you? Who gets your time? Who gets your emotional energy? Red flags don't feel like puzzles anymore. They feel like answers. And instead of asking me, can I make this work? You ask, does this protect me? That's when self-respect kicks in. Not loud, not dramatic, just firm. When you stop ignoring red flags, people from your past don't recognize you anymore. Not because you changed for the worse, but because you stopped being convenient. You don't explain yourself as much. You don't over-justify your boundaries. You don't stay in conversations that feel disrespectful or draining, and that confuses people. They're used to the version of you that stayed quiet, that gave chances, that tried to understand at the expense of being understood. So when you walk away faster now, they call you cold. They say you've changed. They say you're doing too much. But what they really mean is you're no longer available for the dynamic they benefited from. People who thrived on your tolerance don't like your standards. People who were comfortable with your silence don't like your clarity. And that's okay. Because growth isn't about being liked, it's about being protected. You're not harsh, you're not bitter, you're not closed off. You're just done negotiating your self-respect. You no longer wait for disrespect to become unbearable before leaving. You don't need proof anymore. The first pattern is enough. And here's the part that matters most. The right people won't question this version of you. They won't push your boundaries. They won't test your tolerance. They won't need you to over-explain. They'll feel your standards and meet them naturally. Anyone who leaves because you stopped accepting red flags was never meant to stay anyway. That's not loss, that's alignment. Self-respect feels lonely at first, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you stopped tolerating what everyone else normalized. You don't have constant access to people anymore. You don't have drama to distract you. You don't have half connections keeping you entertained. And that quiet can feel heavy, because for a long time, chaos made you feel needed, inconsistency made you feel chosen, fixing things made you feel valuable. Now none of that is there, and your brain tries to convince you that you're missing out, that maybe you were happier when you stayed. that maybe standards are overrated, that maybe being lonely is worse than being disrespected, but that's just the adjustment period. You're unlearning a pattern where love had to hurt to feel real. Self-respect strips away the noise and leaves you with truth. You start seeing how many connections were built on convenience instead of care. How many people stayed because you made it easy for them, not because they valued you. And yes, that realization stings, but it also gives you something you didn't have before: peace, no guessing, no waiting, no emotional whiplash, just clarity. And from that clarity, your standards get quieter but stronger. You don't announce them, you don't defend them, you just live by them. And anyone who can't meet you there falls away naturally. Loneliness isn't punishment here. It's space to rebuild your sense of worth without someone else validating it, space to remember who you are when you're not chasing or fixing or proving. And soon, that loneliness turns into confidence. Not loud confidence, stable confidence. The kind that doesn't rush, the kind that doesn't beg, the kind that knows red flags aren't obstacles, they're directions. At some point, you realize something uncomfortable. You don't actually miss them. You miss the version of yourself that kept trying to be enough. You miss the effort you gave, the hope you held on to, the belief that if you just loved harder, things would finally change, because chasing gave you purpose. It made your pain feel meaningful. It made waiting feel justified. It made disappointment feel like part of the process. Now that you've stopped, there's nothing left to fix. And that's when the grief shows up. You grieve the time you spent trying to earn what should have been given freely. You grieve the energy you poured into people who never poured back. You grieve the patience you mistook for love, not because you were foolish, but because you cared. And it hurts to admit that caring didn't save anything. You start seeing clearly how often you ignored your own voice, how many times your body told you to leave while your heart begged you to stay. You stayed loyal to people who weren't loyal to your peace, and that realization is heavy, because now you can't go back, you can't unsee the patterns, you can't pretend disrespect was accidental, you can't convince yourself that red flags were just misunderstandings. You've outgrown the version of you that survived on hope alone, and while that growth is necessary, it still feels like loss. But here's the truth: you didn't lose something real. You let go of something that only existed because you kept tolerating it. And the more distance you get, the clearer it becomes. What you were missing wasn't love, it was self-respect. Ignoring red flags was never about love, it was about not wanting to choose yourself. Because choosing yourself meant walking away without guarantees, without reassurance, without someone else filling the silence, so you stayed. You told yourself love takes patience, that people need time, that your pain was just part of the process, but deep down, you knew the truth. You weren't staying because it felt right. You were staying because leaving felt terrifying, terrifying to be alone, terrifying to admit you deserved better, terrifying to sit with the idea that you chose someone who couldn't choose you back, though you ignored the signs. Not because you didn't see them, but because seeing them meant action, and action meant accountability. But here's what finally clicks: red flags don't hurt you, ignoring them does. Every time you stayed, you taught yourself that your needs were optional. Every time you excused behavior, you taught yourself that love should be endured. Every time you waited for change, you delayed your own growth. And that cycle doesn't end when someone finally treats you right. It ends when you stop accepting what treats you wrong. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop wanting love. It means you stop betraying yourself just to keep it. It means you walk away sooner. You trust discomfort. You listen the first time something feels off. Not because you're cold, but because you're done confusing pain with connection. And once you reach this point, red flags don't feel complicated anymore. They feel clear. You don't argue with them. You don't negotiate with them. You don't try to turn them green. You leave because now you understand something you didn't before. Being alone is temporary, self-betrayal is cumulative, and you're no longer willing to pay that price. That's not bitterness, that's self-respect, and that's where the cycle finally ends. She replaced me in a week, 7 days, and I've replayed that number in my head more times than I'd like to admit. Because when something you invested months, maybe years, into gets swapped out in 7 days, it doesn't just hurt, it destabilizes you. It makes you question your perception, it makes you question your value, it makes you question whether what you had was ever real in the first place. I keep thinking about how we ended the conversations, the tone, the way she said she needed time, the way she said she had to focus on herself, and then a week later there's someone else standing where I used to stand. So what was the truth? Was she grieving while I was still loving? Was she detaching while I was trying? Was I the only one still emotionally present toward the end? Because you don't replace someone in a week unless you were already halfway gone. That's the part that keeps echoing in my mind. You don't wake up on Monday heartbroken and by Sunday decide you're ready for someone new. That's not healing, that's transition. And if she transitioned that smoothly, that quickly, then maybe I wasn't as permanent in her world as she was in mine. And that realization stings more than the breakup itself, because breakups hurt. But being replaced fast, that attacks your identity. It makes you feel temporary. It makes you feel interchangeable. It makes you feel like you were just holding a spot until something better came along. And I hate that my mind even goes there. But when someone replaces you in a week, you start asking dangerous questions. Was I not enough? Was I boring? Was I too available? Did she already have him lined up? Was I just comfortable, not essential? And the scary part is, your brain doesn't just ask those questions, it starts believing them. You start comparing yourself to someone you don't even know. You start imagining that he must have something you didn't. More excitement, more dominance, more money, more mystery, more something. And now it feels like you lost a competition you didn't even know you were in. But love was never supposed to be competitive. It was supposed to be intentional, chosen, protected. And if she could swap me out in 7 days, then maybe what we had wasn't as protected as I thought. Maybe I was fighting for something that was already slipping away. Maybe I was loving someone who had already emotionally exited. And that's the part that hurts the most. Not that she found someone new, but that she found someone new that quickly, because that speed tells a story. And I'm still trying to figure out what that story says about me. I think what really messed with me wasn't just that she replaced me, it was how effortless it looked, how natural she made it seem. Like I was just a chapter she flipped past without rereading. Because I'm still here sitting with it, still replaying the last conversations in my head, still wondering if I missed signs, still trying to understand where it actually started falling apart, and she's already smiling next to someone new. That kind of speed doesn't just hurt, it humiliates you. It makes you feel like you were the only one emotionally invested at the end. Like while you were trying to fix it, she was already detaching. Like while you were thinking, we just need time, she was thinking, I need someone else. And the scariest part, I don't know which version of reality is true. Was she already talking to him before we ended? Was I slowly being phased out while I was still trying to show up? Or did she just move on that fast because she can't be alone? Every scenario hurts in a different way. If she was already lining him up, then I was loving someone who was preparing my replacement. If she just needed validation that quickly, then I was never the emotional anchor I thought I was. And if she genuinely didn't feel anything after it ended, then maybe I meant less than I believed. That's what a 1-week replacement does to your mind. It makes you question the entire foundation. You start rewriting memories. That time she seemed distant, that time she picked a fight out of nowhere, that time she said she felt confused. Now they don't feel random anymore. Now they feel like early signs of an exit. And the worst part is realizing that you might have been the only one still emotionally inside the relationship toward the end, because you can't replace someone in a week unless you were already halfway gone. And that's the sentence that keeps echoing. Halfway gone. Maybe she left emotionally months ago. Maybe I was loving someone who had already checked out. Maybe the breakup wasn't the beginning of the end. Maybe it was just the announcement, and that realization shifts the pain, because now it's not just heartbreak, it's feeling blindsided, it's feeling like you were operating on outdated information, like you thought you were both building, but she was already packing. And I hate that this makes me question my value, because logically, I know someone moving on fast doesn't define me, but emotionally, it feels like it does. It feels like I was replaceable, interchangeable, temporary, and nobody wants to feel temporary in something they treated as permanent. I keep thinking about how deeply I committed, how I shut down distractions, how I defended her when people doubted us, how I chose her repeatedly. And now it feels like I was the only one guarding something she was willing to trade. That's what makes it feel unfair. Not that she moved on, but that she moved on like it was easy, like I was just space that needed to be filled. And that's the dangerous thought, because I wasn't just space. I was time, I was effort, I was loyalty, I was presence. And if she could replace all of that in 7 days, then either she never fully valued it or she never fully processed it. And I don't know which one hurts more, because if she didn't value it, then I misjudged everything. And if she didn't process it, then she's just distracting herself. But distraction still feels like replacement when you're the one left behind. And I'm left here trying to rebuild confidence that got shaken by a 7-day timeline, trying to remind myself that speed doesn't equal significance, trying to remember that depth doesn't get erased overnight, because if what we had was real to me, then it was real, even if she replaced it quickly. But still, 7 days. That number doesn't just represent time, it represents how fast someone can move on when you thought you meant more. And I'm still trying to figure out what that says about her and what it doesn't say about me. The part nobody prepares you for is how fast replacement attacks your confidence, not just your feelings, your confidence, because heartbreak hurts your chest, but being replaced quickly hits your ego. And ego isn't pride, ego is identity. It's how you see yourself. And when someone moves on in a week, your brain starts filling in blanks you never wanted to think about. You start comparing yourself to someone you don't even know. What does he have that I don't? Is he more exciting, more unpredictable, more emotionally unavailable, more dominant, more detached? Did she need someone less steady, less serious, less invested? You start dissecting yourself like you were the problem to be solved. And that's dangerous, because now it's not just about her moving on, it's about you feeling like you lost to someone else, like this was a competition, like you were weighed against another option and didn't measure up. But here's the part that doesn't get talked about. If someone can replace you in a week, they didn't replace you. They replaced the role, they replaced the attention, they replaced the space, they replaced the feeling of not being alone. But connection, real connection, that doesn't get swapped that quickly. You can substitute company, you can substitute validation, but you can't duplicate depth overnight. And I have to keep reminding myself of that, because when you see them laughing together, posting together, looking comfortable together, your mind doesn't care about logic. It sees images and it translates them into meaning. They're happier. She upgraded. You weren't enough. But images don't show history. They don't show inside jokes. They don't show late night vulnerability. They don't show how deeply you invested. They show a moment, and moments are easy to manufacture. Depth takes time, and if she replaced me in 7 days, then either she had already emotionally left long before we officially ended, or she doesn't process loss the way I do. And both are hard to accept, because if she left emotionally before I did, then I was loving someone who was already gone. And if she doesn't process loss deeply, then I was loving someone who doesn't sit with pain. She escapes it. And escape looks like replacement when you're the one grieving. I won't lie though. Part of what hurts is feeling disposable. Like I was just a chapter. Like I was just a phase. Like I was someone she needed for that season. and once it was over, I was easy to move past. But here's what I'm starting to understand. People who move on that quickly aren't necessarily healed. They're avoiding, they're filling silence, they're covering discomfort because sitting alone after a breakup is uncomfortable. It forces reflection, it forces accountability, it forces grief, and not everyone has the emotional discipline to sit with that. Some people run straight into the next distraction, not because the previous person meant nothing, but because feeling nothing feels easier than feeling everything. And I need to remember that her timeline isn't a measurement of my worth. It's a reflection of her coping style. Still, that doesn't erase the sting, because I'm still here thinking about what we had. Still processing, still grieving, still reconstructing my confidence, and she's already building something new. That imbalance feels unfair, like I'm stuck in emotional traffic while she sped through the exit ramp, and maybe that's the hardest pill to swallow. Not that she found someone else, but that she found someone else while I'm still untangling myself from what we were. It makes you feel behind, like you're losing, like you're weaker for caring longer, but caring longer isn't weakness, it's depth, and depth doesn't reset in 7 days. So maybe the real truth is this: she replaced the position, but she didn't replace the impact. And if what we had was real to me, then it mattered, even if she chose not to sit in it, even if she chose speed over reflection, because I would rather be the one who feels deeply than the one who forgets quickly. 7 days might look like replacement, but sometimes it's just avoidance in disguise. And one day, when the distraction fades, she might finally sit with what I've been sitting with this whole time, and by then I'll be further ahead emotionally than she ever was, not because I moved on faster, but because I actually processed it. And that's something nobody can replace in a week. The worst part about her replacing me in a week isn't even the new guy, it's the silence that came with it, because when someone moves on that fast, they don't just leave you, they erase you, the calls stop, the inside jokes disappear, the routine you built together vanishes, and suddenly the person who used to know your schedule, your moods, your patterns is giving that attention to someone else. That's what makes it feel unreal, because it's not just that she found someone new, it's that she redirected everything so easily. The same energy, the same time, the same effort, just different face. And that's when your mind spirals into the dangerous place. If she can give someone else what she gave me that quickly, was it ever special? That question hits hard, because we don't just want to be loved, we want to feel irreplaceable. We want to feel like what we built had weight, like it left a mark, like it couldn't just be swapped out like a profile picture. And when she replaced me in 7 days, it felt like I was lightweight, like I was something she could carry easily and set down just as easily. But here's the thing I keep wrestling with. Maybe it wasn't easy. Maybe it just looks easy. Social media never shows grief. It doesn't show reflection. It doesn't show confusion. It shows highlights. And maybe what I'm seeing is the highlight reel of her coping, because moving on quickly doesn't always mean you didn't care. Sometimes it means you can't sit still with pain. Sometimes it means you need distraction to avoid accountability. Sometimes it means you'd rather build something new than examine why the last thing broke. But none of that makes it easier to watch, because while she's building new memories, I'm still dismantling old ones. I'm still processing the last conversation, still remembering the way she used to look at me, still trying to figure out when it started fading. And that imbalance makes you feel like you lost twice. You lost the relationship, and you lost the race to move on. And I hate that it feels like a race, because healing shouldn't be competitive. But when someone replaces you in a week, it feels like you're the only one still standing in the wreckage, like she walked away from the crash without even looking back, and you're still checking for broken pieces. What hurts even more is knowing I didn't have a backup, I didn't have someone lined up, I didn't have a just in case. When we ended, it was just me in the silence, and I chose to sit in it, not because I wanted to suffer, but because I respect what we had enough to process it properly. So when she jumped into something new that fast, it felt like I was the only one honoring the history, like I was the only one treating it like it mattered, and that's a lonely feeling, to believe something was significant and watch the other person treat it like it was temporary. But maybe the truth is simpler. Maybe she didn't replace me. Maybe she replaced the feeling of being alone. Maybe she replaced the discomfort. Maybe she replaced the emptiness, because some people don't know how to sit with themselves after something ends. They need noise. They need attention. They need someone new to prove they're still wanted, and if that's the case, then her moving on in a week says more about her relationship with silence than it does about my value. Still, that doesn't stop the thoughts, because at night, logic fades and emotion gets loud. In those moments, it feels like I wasn't enough. Like if I had been better, stronger, more exciting, more something, she wouldn't have moved on that fast. But I have to remind myself, you can be enough for someone and still not be there forever. You can love someone deeply and still not be what they're built to keep. And if she could replace me in 7 days, then maybe I wasn't meant to stay in her life long term. Maybe I was a lesson. Maybe she was mine. But what I refuse to accept is that I was insignificant, because I know how I loved, I know how I showed up, I know how I committed, and those things don't become meaningless just because someone else moved quickly. If anything, they prove something about me, that I invest fully, that I don't keep backups, that I don't treat people like placeholders. And maybe that's rare. Maybe that's why this hurts more, because I wasn't halfway in, I was all the way in. And when you're all the way in, being replaced feels like being erased, but I'm not erased, I'm just healing at a pace that reflects depth, and depth doesn't reset in 7 days. So yeah, she replaced me in a week, but that week doesn't define my worth, it defines her coping speed. And one day when she finally slows down, she might realize you can replace a person's position, but you can't replace the way they loved you. And that's something no one swaps out in 7 days. There's a different kind of pain that comes from being replaced quickly. It's not just heartbreak, it's humiliation. And I don't mean humiliation in a loud, dramatic way. I mean the quiet kind, the kind where you sit alone thinking, how did I not see this coming? Because when someone moves on in a week, it makes you question your awareness. Were there signs I ignored? Did she emotionally detach months before I noticed? Was I holding on to something that was already slipping through my hands? And that's the part that messes with your head the most. Because now it's not just about losing her. It's about doubting yourself, your intuition, your judgment, your ability to read people. You start replaying moments that once felt normal. That random argument, that night she seemed distant, that time she picked up her phone and turned it away slightly, that period where she felt off but said she was fine. At the time, you trusted her words. Now you question everything, because if she replaced you in 7 days, your brain automatically assumes she had a head start. And whether that's true or not, the damage is the same. It makes you feel like you were the only one fully in it, like you were the only one fighting for something she had already decided to let go of. And that imbalance feels like betrayal, even if technically it wasn't, because the emotional timing didn't match. You were still invested, she was already transitioning, and that creates this gap, a painful one, where you're grieving something she already processed, or avoided, or replaced, and it makes you feel late, like you're the last one to realize the relationship was over. And I hate that feeling, because I don't like feeling behind. I don't like feeling like I was operating with outdated information. I don't like feeling like I was loving someone who had already emotionally packed their bags. But maybe that's the reality. Maybe the breakup wasn't the beginning of her detachment. Maybe it was the end of it. Maybe she had already done her grieving while I was still trying to fix things. And that realization hurts in a different way. Because now it's not just that she moved on fast, it's that she moved on before I even knew we were done. And I'm stuck here wondering when it actually ended. Was Was it weeks before the breakup? Months? Did she slowly disconnect while I was still showing up? Because that's the part nobody prepares you for. The possibility that you were loving someone who was already halfway gone. And if that's true, then I wasn't replaced in a week. I was replaced long before that. I just didn't know it yet. But here's the thing, I'm slowly starting to understand. Even if she emotionally left before I did, that doesn't make me weak. It doesn't make me naive. It means I was committed. It means I was still trying. It means I was operating in good faith. And I'd rather be the one who stayed genuine than the one who quietly exited without saying it, because I know how I loved. I didn't keep options open. I didn't emotionally detach while pretending everything was fine. I didn't start building something new while something old was still alive. When I was in it fully. And if she replaced me in a week, then that says something about her capacity to detach, not about my capacity to matter. Still, that week will probably always sting, not because of the new guy, but because of what it symbolized. How quickly someone can shift focus, how fast attention can be redirected, how easy it can look to replace what felt permanent. But maybe permanence isn't about how long something lasts, maybe it's about how deeply it was felt. And if I'm still here processing it while she moved on fast, then maybe I was the one who felt it deeper. And that doesn't make me the loser. It makes me the one who actually experienced it. 7 days might have been enough for her to move forward, but it's not enough to erase what I gave, and I refuse to let her timeline rewrite my value, because being replaced quickly hurts, but being genuine never does. There's something else that hurts about being replaced in a week. It makes you question whether you were ever chosen or just convenient, because if someone can transition that smoothly, that fast, it starts to feel like you were just occupying space, like you weren't irreplaceable, like you were temporary comfort, and nobody wants to feel like temporary comfort. I keep thinking about the way she used to look at me, the way she said things like, I don't see myself with anyone else, the way she made it seem like what we had was rare, and now I'm sitting here wondering how rare something can really be if it can be replaced in 7 days. That's what makes it sting. Because rarity isn't supposed to be swappable, depth isn't supposed to be interchangeable. If something is special, it's supposed to leave a gap when it's gone. But her life doesn't look like there was a gap, it looks filled immediately. And that creates this internal conflict. Was I overestimating my importance? Did I romanticize something that was lighter to her than it was to me? Because when you care deeply, you assume the other person feels the same weight. You assume the attachment is mutual. You assume the history matters equally. But being replaced quickly makes you realize something uncomfortable. Not everyone feels at the same depth you do. Some people attach fast and detach faster. Some people build quickly and rebuild quicker. Some people don't see relationships as something sacred. They see them as something seasonal. And maybe that's the difference between us. Maybe I treat connection like something that deserves reverence, and she treats it like something that deserves momentum, because momentum doesn't stop, it just redirects, and that's exactly what she did. She redirected. The same attention, the same affection, the same emotional energy, just different recipient, and that's hard to swallow because it makes you feel like the container didn't matter, just the feeling. But here's the part I'm slowly realizing. If someone can redirect their attachment that fast, then maybe what they were attached to wasn't you. It was the feeling of being with someone. And that's not the same thing. There's a difference between loving a person and loving the experience of not being alone. And if she loved the experience more than she loved me, then of course she could replace me quickly, because she wasn't replacing a soul connection, she was replacing the role. And that hurts, but it also clarifies, because I don't want to be someone's role. I don't want to be someone's emotional placeholder. I don't want to be someone's for now. I want to be chosen with intention, held with depth, missed when I'm gone. And if she could swap me out in a week, then maybe I wasn't held the way I thought I was. But that doesn't mean I wasn't valuable. It just means she didn't hold me deeply. And those are two different things. Still, There's something about the speed that keeps echoing. 7 days. It makes it feel like I didn't leave a mark, like I didn't leave impact, like I didn't leave space. But I know that's not true because impact isn't measured by how long someone stays single. It's measured by what they learned, what they felt, what they carry forward. And even if she doesn't feel it now, one day when the distraction fades, when the excitement settles, when she's sitting in quiet, she might finally process what she skipped, and by then I won't be waiting. Because here's what I'm starting to understand. Being replaced quickly doesn't mean you were insignificant. It means the other person couldn't sit with loss, and loss reveals maturity. If I'm still here processing, still reflecting, still rebuilding, then I'm not behind, I'm just doing it properly. 7 days might have been enough for her to move forward, but it's not enough to erase who I was, and I refuse to let her timeline determine my value, because I wasn't just someone she dated, I was someone who showed up fully, and that doesn't become meaningless just because someone else showed up faster. She replaced me in a week, but that week says more about her relationship with discomfort than it does about my worth. There's another layer to this that I don't talk about out loud. Anger, not loud anger, not screaming or crashing out. The quiet kind. The kind that sits in your chest when you realize how easily someone redirected what you treated like sacred. Because I stayed loyal, I stayed committed, I stayed focused, and she moved on in 7 days. That makes you question fairness. It makes you feel like you played the game honestly while someone else was already preparing their next move. And I hate that it feels like a game because I never approached it like one. When I was with her, I wasn't scanning the room for upgrades, I wasn't entertaining backups, I wasn't lining up options just in case. I was in it, fully, and now I'm sitting here realizing she either wasn't or she detached long before I knew. And that's what builds resentment. The idea that I was emotionally present while she was emotionally preparing. Because now it feels like I was loyal to a version of her that didn't exist anymore, like I was committed to something she had already mentally ended, and that realization stings. But here's where it shifts, because the anger starts turning into clarity. If she could replace me that quickly, then she was already disconnecting. And if she was already disconnecting, then the relationship wasn't as mutual as I believed. And if it wasn't mutual, then I wasn't losing someone who was fully invested. I was losing someone who was already halfway out. That doesn't make it hurt less, but it reframes it, because now it's not about me being not enough. It's about her not being anchored. Anchored people don't drift that fast. Anchored people don't swap attachments like playlists. Anchored people sit with loss, and if she didn't sit with it, then maybe she never held it deeply, and that realization hurts, but it also frees me, because I don't want someone who can replace depth with distraction. I don't want someone who needs constant attention to feel stable. I want someone who values history, who respects connection, who understands that what you build with someone isn't disposable. And if she replaced me in a week, then maybe I was disposable to her. But that doesn't mean I'm disposable in general. It just means she wasn't built to keep me. And there's a difference. Still, there's a part of me that wonders if she ever thinks about it, if she ever pauses, if she ever compares, if she ever realizes how fast she moved. But I can't live in that space, because waiting for someone to feel what you felt is a trap, and I refuse to trap myself in her timeline. 7 days, that's how fast she moved. But here's the truth. I'd rather take my time healing than rush into something new just to prove I can. I'd rather rebuild properly than distract myself temporarily, because I know what I gave, and I know how I showed up. And I know I don't need to rush into something new to validate that. She replaced me in a week, but I'm rebuilding myself at a pace that lasts, and that's not weakness, that's depth. You know what else being replaced in a week does? It makes you question whether you were ever truly seen. Because if someone really sees you, Your patterns, your effort, your loyalty, your depth, they don't just slide into something new like you were a temporary rental. They feel the absence, they sit in it, they notice the difference, and I keep wondering if she noticed the quiet after I stopped calling, if she noticed the lack of consistency I used to bring, if she noticed that the stability I provided isn't something you just duplicate overnight, or if she just filled the silence so fast that there was no space to notice it all. That's what hurt, the possibility that I wasn't deeply registered, that I was experienced but not understood, because there's a difference between being with someone and truly knowing them. And when someone replaces you quickly, it feels like they never fully knew the weight of what they had. It feels like they liked the experience of you, not the essence of you, and I can handle someone not choosing me. But it's harder to handle feeling like I was easy to move past. I keep thinking about how careful I was, how intentional I was, how I didn't play games, how I didn't keep backups, how when things got hard, I leaned in instead of pulling away. And in the end, it feels like none of that slowed her down. 7 days. That number keeps echoing like a clock ticking in reverse, because for me, 7 days after a breakup feels raw. It feels heavy. It feels like I'm still adjusting to the silence, but for her, 7 days was enough to build something new. And that contrast makes you feel like you loved harder than you were loved. And that's a lonely realization, because loving harder isn't something you brag about. It's something you feel when the other person moves on faster, and you're left holding the emotional weight. But here's what I'm starting to see clearly. Just because she moved on quickly doesn't mean she processed it deeply. Speed isn't strength. Speed can be avoidance. Speed can be distraction. Speed can be ego protection. Sometimes people rush into something new not because the old thing meant nothing, but because it meant too much. Because sitting alone would force them to face what they lost, and not everyone is strong enough to sit in that kind of silence, and maybe I am. Maybe the reason I'm still here thinking, reflecting, feeling is because I actually let it hit me. I didn't numb it, I didn't immediately replace it, I didn't run from it, I sat with it, and sitting with pain requires maturity. It requires discipline, it requires emotional depth. So maybe this isn't about me being less valuable, maybe it's about me being more capable of processing, and that's not weakness, that's growth. Still, there's something about knowing she's creating new memories that stings, because those were supposed to be ours. The random laughs, the new places, the inside jokes. Now someone else gets that version of her, and I have to let go of the idea that it was only meant for me. And that's hard, but here's the truth I can't ignore anymore. If she could replace me in a week, then I was loving someone who wasn't built to stay long term. Because people who are built to stay don't detach that fast. They don't redirect that easily. They don't swap depth for novelty overnight. And I don't want someone who can treat connection like it's interchangeable. I want someone who understands the weight of history. Who understands that what you build with someone isn't disposable? Who understands that real attachment doesn't reset in 7 days? So yeah, she replaced me in a week, but I'm rebuilding myself in a way that lasts longer than a rebound ever will. And when I look back at this one day, I won't just remember the hurt, I'll remember the clarity, because being replaced quickly doesn't mean you were insignificant. It means the other person wasn't anchored, and I refuse to confuse someone else's instability with my lack of worth. 7 days might have been enough for her to move forward, but it's not enough to erase what I was. And one day, when I'm with someone who values depth the way I do, this week won't define me. It'll just be proof that I was never meant to stay where I was easily replaced. At some point, the hurt turns into something quieter. Not lighter, just quieter. Because you can only replay 7 days so many times before your brain gets tired of the echo. And when the noise slows down, clarity starts creeping in. I started asking myself a different question. Not why did she replace me so fast, but why am I measuring my value through her speed? Because that's what I was doing without realizing it. I was using her timeline as a mirror, If she moved on quickly, I must not have mattered deeply. If she looks happy, I must have been replaceable. If she didn't hesitate, I must not have left impact. But that logic is flawed. Her speed is not a measurement of my depth. Her distraction is not a reflection of my worth. Her ability to move forward quickly doesn't erase the way I showed up. And once I started separating those things, something shifted, because I know how I loved, I know I was intentional, I know I was loyal, I know I didn't treat what we had like it was temporary. So if she did, that says something about her capacity, not my value, and I had to stop turning her coping style into my insecurity, because that's what I was doing. I was letting her rebound rewrite my confidence. I was letting her quick transition convince me I was forgettable. But forgettable doesn't leave you reflecting. Forgettable doesn't leave you rebuilding. Forgettable doesn't leave you questioning your own growth. What we had meant something, even if she chose not to sit in that meaning. And maybe that's the difference between us. I process, she replaces. I reflect, she redirects. I sit with the silence, she fills it. And neither is necessarily wrong, but one builds depth, the other builds distraction, and depth always wins in the long run, because distraction fades, novelty fades, rebounds lose their adrenaline, and when that happens, whatever was avoided eventually resurfaces, and by then I won't be stuck in the same place, because while she rushed forward, I rebuilt properly. And rebuilding properly takes longer, but it lasts longer too. 7 days might have been enough for her to feel okay, but it wasn't enough for me to lose myself, and that's what matters. So yeah, she replaced me in a week. And for a while that felt like proof that I wasn't enough, proof that I was temporary, proof that I was easy to move past. But now, it feels like proof of something else. Proof that I love deeply, proof that I don't detach easily, proof that I don't treat connection like it's disposable. Because if I could have replaced her that fast and didn't, that says something. It says I value what I build. It says I respect history. It says I don't jump into something new just to soothe my ego. And I'd rather be the one who heals slowly than the one who forgets quickly. Because forgetting quickly doesn't mean you're strong. Sometimes it just means you're avoiding, and I don't want to avoid. I want to grow. I want to understand what worked, what didn't, what I tolerated, what I ignored. I want to rebuild my confidence without attaching it to someone else's timeline. She replaced me in a week, but she didn't replace my character. She didn't replace my loyalty. She didn't replace my ability to love fully. And one day, someone is going to experience that depth and recognize it immediately. Not treat it like a placeholder, not treat it like a phase, but treat it like something rare, because rare things don't get swapped in 7 days. They get protected, so maybe this wasn't about me being replaced, maybe it was about me being redirected away from someone who could move on that quickly towards someone who won't. 7 days hurt, but it also clarified. I don't want to be in a position where I can be replaced that easily ever again. And the only way to guarantee that is to choose someone who understands the weight of what they're holding, and next time, I will. She said I wasn't man enough, and I won't lie. That one stuck, not because I believe it, but because when someone you love questions your masculinity, it hits somewhere deeper than regular criticism. It's not just about behavior, it's identity. It's everything you thought you were doing right suddenly being reframed as weakness. What does man enough even mean? Because I showed up, I communicated, I stayed loyal, I tried to fix things instead of run from them. But apparently that wasn't enough. Apparently being calm instead of aggressive was a problem. Apparently wanting to talk things through instead of shutting down made me soft. Apparently expressing emotion made me less of a man. And that's when I realized something dangerous. Some people confuse masculinity with dominance. They confuse emotional control with emotional absence. They confuse stability with weakness. And if that's the definition she was using, then maybe I was never supposed to fit it. But still, when she said it, it made me question myself. Because no matter how confident you are, words like that linger. They make you replay moments. They make you wonder if you should have been tougher, colder, less available, less understanding. And that's how toxic standards start reshaping you quietly. I started analyzing everything after that. Was I too patient, too willing to compromise, too quick to apologize? Because I thought being a man meant being responsible, being accountable, being emotionally mature. But maybe she wanted something louder, more dominant, more unpredictable, and that's confusing because society tells men two opposite things. Be strong, but don't be cold. Be vulnerable, but don't be weak. Lead, but don't control. And somehow you're supposed to balance all of it perfectly. So when she said I wasn't man enough, I started wondering, was I too emotionally available? Was I too steady? Was I not exciting enough? But here's the truth that took me time to accept. Being consistent doesn't make you less of a man. Being calm doesn't make you less masculine. Being emotionally intelligent doesn't make you weak. It makes you evolved. And not everyone is comfortable with evolved. Some people are used to chaos, used to intensity, used to men who are hard to access emotionally. So when they meet someone who communicates clearly and stands firm without yelling, it feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar can feel unmanly to someone who's been conditioned differently. But that's not my problem to fix. The deeper issue wasn't her words. It was what they tried to take from me. My confidence, because when someone attacks your masculinity, they're attacking your foundation. They're saying you're not enough as you are, and that's heavy. But here's what I had to learn. Being man enough means being emotionally unavailable. If it means suppressing how I feel, if it means pretending I don't care, if it means dominating instead of communicating, then I don't want that version of masculinity, because strength isn't loud. It's controlled, it's stable, it's secure enough to not overreact. It's confident enough to not prove itself constantly. And maybe she mistook calm for weak. Maybe she mistook kindness for softness. Maybe she mistook emotional awareness for insecurity. But that doesn't redefine me, it just shows what she was used to. What hurt the most wasn't that she left, it was that she framed it like I lacked something. Like I needed to become more, like I needed to step up into some undefined standard. But love isn't about becoming someone else to fit someone's idea of masculinity. It's about alignment. If she needed someone louder, more dominant, more emotionally distant, that's preference, not proof that I wasn't enough. Wasn't. Because being man enough shouldn't mean performing toughness. It should mean integrity, leadership, emotional control, responsibility, and I had all of that, just not in a way that matched her expectations, and that's okay. I realized something important after sitting with it. The right woman won't question your masculinity. She'll feel safe in it. She won't need you to be aggressive to feel protected. She won't need you to be emotionally shut down to feel secure. She won't test your dominance to measure your worth. She'll recognize strength and stability. She'll see leadership and accountability. She'll see masculinity in consistency, because real masculinity isn't about intimidation, it's about presence. It's about knowing who you are without needing to prove it constantly. And here's the part nobody talks about. Sometimes when someone says you're not man enough, what they really mean is you're not toxic enough for what I'm used to. Because chaos feels passionate to some people, silence feels strong to some people, emotional distance feels masculine to some people, but healthy masculinity feels boring if you're addicted to instability, and that's not an insult, it's reality. Some people equate unpredictability with strength, and when they meet steadiness, they don't know what to do with it. I had to ask myself something hard. Was I actually lacking, or was I just not performing? Because there's a difference. Lacking means I don't possess something. Performing means I'm pretending to. And I refuse to perform masculinity for approval. I refuse to become colder just to seem stronger. I refuse to suppress my emotional intelligence just to look dominant. Because the right person won't require that. They'll appreciate it. If anything, being called not man enough forced me to define what that means for myself. To me, being a man means standing on your word, protecting without controlling, communicating without yelling, being emotionally disciplined, owning your mistakes, leading with stability, and I did all of that. So if that wasn't enough for her, it doesn't mean I failed. It means we defined strength differently. I won't let one person's perception reshape my identity, because masculinity isn't loud. It isn't about dominance. It isn't about intimidation. It's about internal control. It's about consistency. It's about knowing who you are when no one is watching. And if someone mistakes calm strength for weakness, that says more about what they're used to than what I am. She said I wasn't man enough, but I am man enough to walk away instead of yelling, stay calm instead of escalating, express how I feel instead of suppressing it, choose growth instead of ego. And that's the kind of man I'll stay, because the right woman won't need me to prove my masculinity. She'll feel secure in it, and I'd rather be steady and misunderstood than loud and respected for something I'm not. If being man enough means losing emotional depth, then I'll pass. Because real strength doesn't shout, it stands. I still remember the last message she ever sent me, not because it was long, not because it explained everything, but because it didn't. It was simple, short, like it didn't carry the weight of everything that came before it, and that's what made it hit harder. Because how do you go from talking every day to one final message that feels like nothing? At first I kept rereading it, not because I didn't understand it, but because I felt like there had to be something more hidden in it, some deeper meaning, some explanation between the lines, something that would make it all make sense. But there wasn't. It said just enough to end things and not enough to explain them, and that's what messes with you, because your mind keeps trying to fill in the gaps that they left empty. I kept thinking back to everything before that message, all the conversations, all the moments that felt real, all the things she said that made it seem like we were building something. And then I'd look at that last message again, and it didn't match. It didn't feel like it came from the same person. Because how do you go from consistency to something that feels so detached, so final, without feeling final at all? The hardest part wasn't even what she said, it was what she didn't say. No real explanation, no real accountability, no real closure, just something that closed the door without ever fully acknowledging what was behind it. And that leaves you stuck in a weird place, because you're not just dealing with an ending, you're dealing with questions that never got answers. For a while I wanted to reply, not to argue, not to convince her to stay, just to understand, to ask the questions that were sitting in my head. What changed? When did it change? Was any of it real? But I didn't, because deep down I knew something. If she wanted me to understand, she would have explained it the first time. And that's a hard truth to accept, because it means the silence after that message was intentional, not confusion, not hesitation, a decision. She said what she wanted to say, and everything she didn't say was also part of that choice. After that, the conversation just stopped. No follow-ups, no checking in, no, how are you? Just silence. And silence hits different when you're used to hearing from someone every day. Because now it's not just quiet, it's absence. For a while I kept expecting another message, something more, something that would make it feel complete, but nothing came. And eventually, I had to accept something I didn't want to. That last message was really the last one. And over time, I stopped looking at it like something unfinished. I stopped expecting more, because sometimes closure doesn't come from another person. It comes from accepting what they already showed you, and what she showed me was enough, even if it wasn't explained. I still remember the last message she sent me, not because of what it said, but because of what it meant. It was the end. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. And now I understand something I didn't then. The way someone ends things tells you everything you need to know about how they saw it. So I stopped waiting for another message, stopped looking for more words, because the last one was already saying everything it needed to, just not in the way I wanted. There wasn't a big moment, no argument, no dramatic ending, no clear, this is over. That's what made it worse, because the moment I realized she stopped loving me was quiet. It was in the way she talked to me, The way her voice didn't carry the same feeling anymore. The way everything sounded the same, but felt different. And that's when it hit me. Nothing happened, but everything changed. At first I tried to ignore it, because when something shifts like that, your first instinct isn't to accept it, it's to explain it. Maybe she's just tired. Maybe she's stressed. Maybe she just needs time. So I kept talking to her like nothing changed. Like if I stayed the same, things would go back to how they were, but they didn't. The conversations were still there, but the feeling wasn't. She still replied, still answered, still kept things going just enough, but something was missing. That energy, that warmth, that feeling like she actually wanted to be there. And you can feel that difference even if you don't want to admit it. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Shorter replies, less emotion, less effort to keep things alive. Like I was someone she talked to, not someone she was connected to. And that's when it started sinking in. Because love doesn't disappear all at once, it fades slowly, quietly, until one day you realize you're the only one still holding on to what it used to be. And that realization hits in the smallest moments. A dry reply, a delayed answer, a conversation that used to flow that now feeling forced. I kept thinking it would come back, that maybe it was just a phase, that maybe I just needed to be more patient, so I stayed. I kept showing up the same way, hoping she'd meet me there again, but she didn't, and that's when it finally clicked. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet realization. I'm still here, but she's not really. Not in the way she used to be. That's the hardest kind of ending. Because nothing officially ended, there's no clear moment to point at. Just a slow shift until you're standing in something that looks the same, but doesn't feel the same at all. And once you feel that, you can't unfeel it. You can try to ignore it, try to convince yourself it's temporary, but deep down, you know, something changed, and it's not coming back. The moment I realized she stopped loving me was the moment I stopped feeling loved by her. No words, no explanation, just a feeling that wasn't there anymore. And now I understand something clearly. Love doesn't just live in words, it lives in effort, in presence, in consistency. And when those disappear, the feeling follows. That was the moment, not loud, not obvious, just real. For the longest time I thought she loved me, not just liked me, not just enjoyed being around me. I thought she actually loved me because she talked to me every day. She wanted to know what I was doing. She asked about my life like it mattered to her. And when someone shows you that kind of attention, it's easy to believe the feelings behind it are real. So I believed it. I believed the late night conversations meant something deeper. I believed the way she smiled when we talked meant she cared. I believed all the time we spent together was building something real. But looking back now, I think she didn't love me. I think she loved the attention. There's a difference. When someone loves you, they care about who you are, your thoughts, your struggles, your future. They care about the person standing in front of them. But when someone loves the attention, the focus isn't really on you, it's on how you make them feel, the compliments, the validation, the feeling of being wanted. And for a while I was giving her all of that. I was the person who always answered, the person who always listened, the person who always showed up when she needed someone to talk to. And I thought that meant I mattered to her, but eventually I started noticing something strange. Whenever I pulled back, she suddenly came closer. Whenever I stopped giving her attention, she started reaching out again. Not because she missed me, but because she missed the way I made her feel. And that's when something started becoming clear. Maybe she didn't love me the way I thought she did. Maybe she just loved having someone who cared about her that much. Once that thought entered my head, that maybe she didn't love me, maybe she just loved the attention, I started seeing things differently. Moments that once felt meaningful started feeling different. I remembered how often she reached out when she was bored, when she had nothing going on, when she needed someone to talk to. And every time I was there, answering her messages, listening to her problems, giving her reassurance whenever she doubted herself. At the time, I thought that's what love looked like. Two people being there for each other. But when I really looked at it honestly, something felt uneven. Because when she needed attention, I was always available. But when I needed support, it didn't always feel the same. Sometimes she would disappear. Sometimes the conversation would suddenly end. Sometimes it felt like the connection only existed when she was the one who needed it. And that's when a difficult question started forming in my mind. Was she actually interested in me? Or was she interested in the way I made her feel about herself? Because attention can be addictive. When someone constantly reminds you that you're special, that you're wanted, that someone cares deeply about you, it feels good, really good. And some people don't fall in love with the person giving them that feeling. They fall in love with the feeling itself, the validation, the reassurance, the comfort of knowing someone is always there. And I think that's what I was to her. Not a partner, not someone she truly wanted to build something with, but someone who gave her a constant source of emotional attention. And the moment I started seeing that pattern, everything began to make more sense. The more I thought about it, the more patterns started standing out. Because when someone actually loves you, their presence in your life is consistent. They don't only show up when they need something. They don't only reach out when they're bored. They don't only care when the attention is focused on them. But with her, the connection always seemed to revolve around how she felt. If she had a bad day, I was the first person she called. If she felt insecure, I was the one reminding her how amazing she was. If she needed someone to listen, I was always there. And at the time, I thought that meant I was important to her. But eventually, I noticed something uncomfortable. When I had a bad day, she wasn't always there the same way. When I needed reassurance, the conversation would shift quickly. When I tried to open up about my own struggles, it didn't always hold her attention for long. And that's when it started feeling like the relationship wasn't built around us. It was built around her receiving and me giving. And the scary part about that kind of dynamic is you don't notice it right away. Because when you care about someone, giving feels natural. You don't keep score. You don't measure every moment of effort. You just show up because you believe the connection matters. But slowly you start realizing something. You're the one holding most of the emotional weight. You're the one keeping the conversations alive. You're the one making sure the connection doesn't fade. And when you stop doing that, everything changes. That's when the real truth shows itself. Because the moment I stopped giving her constant attention, something strange happened. She didn't start fighting harder for the connection. She didn't try to understand what changed. Instead, the distance grew. And that's when I realized something that hurt more than the breakup itself. She didn't miss me. She missed the attention I gave her. Realizing that she didn't miss me, she missed the attention, was one of the hardest truths to accept. Because when you care about someone deeply, you don't want to believe that your place in their life was built around something that shallow. You want to believe the connection meant something real, that the conversations mattered, that the time you spent talking late at night actually meant you were building something. But once I started paying attention to the pattern, it became impossible to ignore. Whenever I gave her attention, everything felt great. She was warm, engaged, interested. She would laugh more, reply faster, make it seem like we had this deep connection. But the moment that attention slowed down, everything changed. Suddenly the conversations felt shorter, the interest faded, the energy shifted, and that's when it finally clicked. Her feelings weren't connected to me. They were connected to the attention I was giving her. Because when someone loves you, their connection doesn't disappear just because the attention changes. But when someone loves the attention, the moment that validation slows down, so does their interest. And looking back now, that explains everything. Why she would suddenly become distant, why she would come back the moment I stopped reaching out, why the connection always felt strongest when I was the one giving the most. It wasn't love, it was validation, and I was the person supplying it. Once I finally understood that she loved the attention more than she loved me, a lot of things started making sense. For the longest time, I kept wondering why the connection always felt unstable, why some days she seemed completely invested, and other days she felt distant, why the energy between us depended so heavily on how much I was giving. At the time, I thought that was normal. I thought relationships just had ups and downs. But there's a difference between normal ups and downs and a connection that only exists when one person is constantly feeding it. And that's what this was. Whenever I was fully present, texting first, asking about her day, complimenting her, showing that I cared, everything felt good between us. But when I pulled back even slightly, the dynamic changed immediately. The warmth disappeared, the conversation slowed down, and the connection that once felt so strong suddenly felt fragile. That's when it became impossible to ignore what was really happening. Because love doesn't disappear just because attention shifts for a moment, but validation does. Validation needs constant reinforcement. It needs someone to keep providing that feeling of being admired and wanted, and once that source slows down, the person who depended on it starts looking for it somewhere else. That's when I realized something that hurt more than I expected. I wasn't the person she loved, I was the person who made her feel important. And once you realize that difference, you start understanding the relationship in a completely different way. Once that realization settled in, that she loved the attention more than she loved me, something inside me started shifting. At first it hurt more, because it meant all the things I thought were meaningful might not have meant the same thing to her. All those long conversations, all the moments where she told me things she said she didn't tell anyone else, all the time she said she appreciated having me in her life. I thought those things meant we were building something real, but now I started seeing them through a different lens. Maybe she didn't say those things because she loved me. Maybe she said them because she loved the feeling of having someone who cared about her that much. And that's a dangerous dynamic, because when someone becomes your main source of validation, it feels powerful. You feel admired, you feel important, you feel like someone is always there to remind you that you matter. But that feeling isn't the same as love. Love cares about the person giving the attention. Validation only cares about the feeling it creates. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something uncomfortable. Whenever I tried to shift the focus of the relationship, whenever I wanted something deeper, the energy changed. If I asked serious questions about where things were going, if I talked about building something more stable, if I needed emotional support myself, that's when the connection suddenly felt weaker. Almost like the relationship only worked when I was the one giving, not when I needed something back. And that's when the truth became impossible to ignore. The relationship wasn't built on mutual connection, it was built on attention, and I was the one providing it. After I understood that the relationship was built more on attention than love, another uncomfortable truth started showing itself. I wasn't just giving attention, I was maintaining the entire connection. I was the one making sure the conversation didn't die. I was the one checking in first. I was the one asking how she was doing, making sure she felt heard, making sure she felt valued. And at the time, I didn't see that as a problem. When you care about someone, putting in effort feels natural. You don't think about it like a transaction. You think about it like loyalty. But over time, I started noticing something. The relationship only felt alive when I was feeding it. Whenever I stepped back, even a little, everything started fading. The messages slowed down, the energy dropped. The connection that once felt strong suddenly felt fragile, and that's when it hit me. Love doesn't disappear the moment someone stops giving constant attention, but validation does. Validation needs fuel. It needs someone constantly reminding you that you're wanted, that you're interesting, that someone is thinking about you. And the moment that fuel slows down, the person who depended on it starts feeling empty. That's when they either come back asking for more, or they go find someone else who will give it to them. And I think that's what I was to her. Not a partner, not someone she truly wanted to build something with. I was a source of attention, a source of validation, a source of emotional reassurance. And once you realize you were someone's source, not their choice, the whole relationship starts looking different. Once I accepted that I was just a source of attention for her, something else started becoming clear. The connection only existed when it benefited her emotionally. Whenever she needed reassurance, I was important. Whenever she felt lonely, I mattered. Whenever she needed someone to remind her that she was attractive, interesting, or worth talking to, suddenly I was the person she wanted to talk to again. But the moment she felt good again, the moment that emotional gap inside her was filled, something would change. The urgency would disappear, the replies would slow down, the energy would fade, and I would sit there wondering what I did wrong. For a long time, I blamed myself for those shifts. I thought maybe I said something wrong. Maybe I wasn't interesting enough. Maybe I didn't keep the excitement alive. But once you understand the difference between love and attention, everything makes more sense. Love stays even when the excitement fades. Love stays even when you're not constantly entertaining someone. Love stays even when the validation slows down for a moment. But attention doesn't work like that. Attention is temporary. It's something people chase when they need to feel good about themselves. And once they get that feeling again, they don't always need the person who gave it to them anymore. Looking back, that explains why the connection always felt inconsistent. It explains why some days she felt deeply invested in us all, and other days it felt like she barely noticed I existed, because I wasn't the person she loved. I was the person she turned to whenever she needed to feel important. And once I saw that clearly, the whole relationship started making sense in a way it never had before. For a while, realizing that hurt more than anything else, because nobody wants to believe they were just someone's source of attention. You want to believe the connection meant something deeper. You want to believe the time you invested mattered in the same way for both of you. But eventually something changed in the way I saw it. I stopped feeling embarrassed about how much I cared, because caring deeply isn't the problem. The problem is giving that level of attention to someone who only values the feeling it gives them. And that's a big difference. There's nothing wrong with being loyal. There's nothing wrong with showing up for someone you care about. The mistake is believing that everyone who accepts your attention values it the same way you do. Some people appreciate attention, other people depend on it. And the people who depend on it will keep you close as long as you keep feeding that feeling inside them. But the moment the attention stops, the connection disappears, not because they suddenly stop liking you, but because the feeling they were chasing isn't coming from you anymore. And once you understand that, something inside you changes. You stop chasing people who only show up when they need something. You stop investing in connections that only exist when you're the one giving, because you realize something important. You deserve someone who values you, not just the attention you give them. Looking back now, I don't think she loved me, but I also don't think she was pretending the whole time. I think she genuinely liked how I made her feel. She liked the attention. She liked the reassurance. She liked having someone who consistently reminded her that she mattered. And for a while, that was enough to keep the connection alive. But attention alone can't build something real. Because the moment that attention stops, there's nothing holding the relationship together. And that's exactly what happened. Once I stopped constantly feeding the connection, it disappeared. At first, that felt like rejection. But now I see it differently. It wasn't rejection, it was clarity, because it showed me the difference between someone who loves you and someone who only loves the feeling you give them. And once you see that difference clearly, you stop blaming yourself for the way things ended. You realize you weren't losing someone who truly valued you. You were losing someone who valued what you provided. And that's not the kind of connection worth holding on to. one day I'll meet someone who doesn't just enjoy the attention I give them, someone who actually cares about the person giving it, someone who chooses me even when the excitement fades, someone who values the connection, not just the validation. And when that happens, I won't feel like I'm constantly proving my worth, because the right person doesn't stay for the attention, they stay for you. I don't think I ever wanted too much. I didn't need perfection. I didn't need constant attention. I didn't need someone to save me. I just wanted to be cared for. I wanted someone who noticed when I went quiet, someone who checked in without being asked, someone who didn't treat my presence like something optional. But every time I tried to explain that, it sounded like neediness, like I was asking for too much. So I stayed quiet. I accepted less. I told myself I was independent enough to not need reassurance, but deep down that wasn't true. I wasn't asking to be obsessed over. I wasn't asking to be put on a pedestal. I was asking to matter, to feel like my absence would be noticed, like my feelings would be considered, like I didn't have to earn basic care by being easy, understanding, or low maintenance. And every time I didn't get that, I told myself it was fine, that this is just how people are, that expecting care is unrealistic, that I should be grateful for whatever effort showed up, but wanting to be cared for doesn't make you weak. It means you're human. It means you want a connection where effort is mutual and presence isn't forced. And the hardest part is realizing how long you stayed in places where you felt invisible just because you didn't want to seem like you needed too much. I didn't want someone to fix me. I just wanted someone who cared enough to stay aware of me. At some point, wanting to be cared for turns into accepting the bare minimum. You stop asking questions, stop expressing needs, stop pointing out what hurts, because every time you do, it feels like you're asking for too much. So you adjust, you get excited over replies that should be normal, you appreciate effort that should be consistent, you thank people for things they do effortlessly if they truly cared, and you tell yourself this is just how love works. But deep down you feel it, the imbalance, the quiet disappointment, the way you're always the one paying attention. You're not asking for grand gestures, you're asking for awareness, to be checked on, to be considered, to feel like your emotions aren't an inconvenience, but instead you keep shrinking your expectations to fit what people are willing to give. You call it being low maintenance, being understanding, being independent, when really you're just afraid that if you ask for more, you'll lose what little you have. And that's the part that hurts, because you don't want more love, you just want the love that's already there to show up consistently. You don't want to beg for care, you want it to be natural. And the longer you settle, the more you start questioning yourself. Am I too sensitive? Am I needy? Am I wrong for wanting this? But wanting to be cared for was never the problem. Staying where you're barely noticed is. Pretending you don't need care slowly disconnects you from yourself. You start ignoring your own feelings before anyone else can. You tell yourself you're fine even when you're not. You swallow disappointment and call it maturity, because admitting you want care feels risky. It feels like giving someone power to decide whether you're too much, so you choose silence instead. You become the easy one, the understanding one, the one who doesn't ask for reassurance or consistency or emotional presence. And people like that version of you, because it asks for nothing, but inside something starts to dull. You feel lonely even when you're not alone. You feel unseen even when someone's there. You start questioning whether your needs are even valid anymore. That's when you know you've gone too far. Not by wanting care, but by convincing yourself you don't deserve it. You weren't meant to love people from a distance. You weren't meant to be strong at the cost of being felt. Care isn't weakness. Wanting it isn't dependency. It's connection. And the moment you deny yourself that truth, you don't just lose it from others, you lose it from yourself. There's a moment where it finally hits you. You've been caring for everyone else while no one was really caring for you. You remember how often you checked in, how often you noticed shifts in tone, how often you adjusted yourself to make things easier for others, and then you look back and realize how rarely anyone did that for you. No one asked if you were okay when you went quiet. No one noticed when your energy changed. No one slowed down enough to really see you. And that realization hurts in a quiet, heavy way because you weren't asking for perfection. You weren't asking to be prioritized above everything. You were asking for reciprocity. To feel like your presence mattered as much as you made theirs matter. That's when the exhaustion sets in. Not physical tiredness, emotional fatigue. The kind that comes from always being the one who cares first, who understands more, who gives grace even when it costs you. You start wondering how you became so good at holding space for people who never learned how to hold it for you. And the truth is uncomfortable. You taught them it was okay to lean on you without leaning back, to receive care without returning it, not because you wanted imbalance, but because you didn't want to feel abandoned. And realizing that is both painful and clarifying because it shows you something important. You weren't asking for too much, you were just asking it from the wrong people. That realization changes how you choose people. You stop being impressed by words. You stop getting attached to potential. You stop mistaking attention for care because now you know the difference. Care looks like consistency. It looks like remembering. It looks like showing up even when it's not convenient. So you start paying attention to who checks in without being prompted, who notices when you're off, who doesn't make you explain why you need what you need. And at first that makes your circle smaller. You walk away from people you once would have stayed for. You stop overextending. You stop being the only one holding things together. Not because you don't care anymore, but because you finally care about yourself too. You don't chase care now. You don't hint at it. You don't downplay your needs to make someone comfortable. You let people show you how they show up. And if they don't, you don't argue with it. You don't try to teach them how to care. You accept the information and move accordingly because wanting to be cared for isn't a flaw, it's a boundary. And the moment you start honoring it, you realize something important. You'd rather be alone than be surrounded and still feel unseen. Choosing yourself feels lonely at first, not because you made the wrong choice, but because you stopped filling the silence with people who never really saw you. You notice the absence quickly, the lack of constant conversation, the quiet that comes when you're no longer overgiving just to stay connected, and that quiet can be uncomfortable because for a long time, being needed made you feel valued. Being available made you feel important. Being the one who cared most made you feel like you belonged. Now you don't do that anymore. You don't reach out first every time. You don't check in when it's never returned. You don't hold space for people who won't hold it for you. And yes, that leaves gaps, but those gaps feel different than the loneliness you had before. Before you were lonely even when surrounded by people. Now you're alone but at peace. There's no resentment building, no quiet disappointment, no wondering why you're not enough. Just space to breathe, space to feel what you feel, space to rebuild a relationship with yourself that isn't based on neglect. You start realizing that loneliness with self-respect is lighter than connection without care. And once you taste that peace, it's hard to go back because you finally understand. Being cared for starts with not abandoning yourself anymore. Learning how to receive care is harder than giving it. That part surprised me. I was always good at showing up, at checking in, at being thoughtful without being asked. But when someone tried to do that for me, I didn't know how to relax into it. I questioned it. I downplayed it. I felt uncomfortable being the one who was noticed because for so long, care felt conditional, like something you earned by being useful, easy, understanding. So when someone offers it freely, without you proving anything, your first instinct is to brace yourself. You wait for it to disappear. You look for the catch. You assume it won't last. And that's not because you don't want care. It's because you're not used to it being consistent. You're used to being the giver, the supporter, the one who adapts. So receiving feels vulnerable in a way giving never did. It means letting someone see you without performing, letting yourself need without apologizing, letting care exist without questioning your worthiness of it. That takes unlearning. It takes time to believe that you don't have to exhaust yourself to deserve tenderness. And I'm still learning that, still reminding myself that care doesn't have to be chased, earned, or negotiated. Sometimes it's just there, and allowing it in is the bravest thing you can do after spending so long surviving without it. At some point, you stop asking why people don't care. You stop replaying conversations, stop analyzing tone, stop wondering what you could have done differently, because that question only keeps you stuck chasing explanations instead of truth. So you ask a different question: who actually shows up for me? Not who says they care, not who means well, not who shows interest when it's easy, but who checks in consistently, who notices when you're quiet, who doesn't disappear when you need space or reassurance or time. And the answer is usually smaller than you expect: fewer people, less noise, more clarity. That realization hurts, but it also simplifies everything. You stop pouring into people who only take. You stop investing in connections that leave you feeling unseen. You don't make announcements. You don't explain your shift. You just move differently. You protect your energy. You reserve your care for those who return it naturally. And slowly you stop feeling desperate to be noticed, because you're no longer surrounding yourself with people who make you feel invisible. Care stops being something you beg for and starts being something you recognize. And that's when you finally understand being cared for isn't about convincing people to treat you better. It's about choosing the ones who already do. Wanting to be cared for doesn't make you needy. It makes you honest. Needy is asking someone to fill a void they didn't create. Needy is expecting one person to carry everything for you. But wanting care, that's wanting reciprocity. That's wanting your effort to be met, your presence to be valued, your emotions to be considered. You're not asking someone to revolve their life around you. You're asking them to see you. And somewhere along the way, you were taught that asking for that was too much. So you minimized yourself. You softened your needs. You told yourself independence meant not needing anything from anyone. But that wasn't strength. That was self-denial, because even the strongest people need to feel cared for sometimes, need to feel noticed, need to feel like their existence matters to someone else. You don't want care because you can't survive without it. You want it because connection is part of being human. And the moment you stop shaming yourself for wanting that, everything changes. You stop apologizing for your needs. You stop pretending you're okay with being overlooked. You stop accepting crumbs just to feel included. You realize something important. You're not asking for too much. You're asking the wrong people. At the end of all this, I realized something simple. Wanting to be cared for is not something I negotiate anymore. I'm done explaining why it matters, done justifying why I feel hurt, done shrinking my needs so someone else can stay comfortable. Care is not a bonus, it's not extra, it's not something you earn by being quiet, easy, or low maintenance. It's the baseline. If someone doesn't notice me, doesn't check in, doesn't consider how their actions affect me, then they don't get access to me. Not out of bitterness, not out of anger, out of self-respect. I spent too long convincing myself that wanting care made me weak, too long accepting half presence and calling it connection, too long staying where I felt invisible, just to avoid being alone. I'm not doing that anymore. I don't need to be chased. I don't need to be obsessed over. I just need to be considered. And if someone can't do that naturally, without me begging, hinting, or explaining, then they're not my person. Because the right people won't make you feel guilty for wanting to matter. They won't make care feel conditional. They won't make you question whether you're asking for too much. They'll just show up. And until that happens, I'd rather stand alone with my needs intact than sit beside someone who makes me feel unseen. I didn't want too much. I just wanted to be cared for. And now I care enough about myself to never accept less again.